The doctor accepted a virgin as payment, but he didn't expect to fall in love. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The autumn wind whispered through Newark's streets as Naomi Elise Brooks arranged books by color on the worn wooden shelves of Cornerstone Books. Her fingers traced the spines with practiced care, while her mind wandered to the little notes she'd been leaving in random pages, tiny paper boats carrying words of encouragement for strangers she'd never meet. Remember to breathe. The story's not over yet, she wrote on a fresh paper napkin, tucking it between the pages of a well-loved romance novel. Her 3C curls caught the late afternoon light streaming through the dusty windows, creating a halo effect that matched her gentle spirit. The small bell above the door chimed, and Naomi looked up to see her father, Raymond Louis Brooks, his delivery uniform creased from a long day's work. The sight of his tired eyes made her heart squeeze. He'd been taking extra shifts lately, though he never said why. "Baby girl, we need to get to St. Michael's. Your grandma, Marva." His voice cracked slightly. She collapsed at home. The napkin slipped from Naomi's fingers, her world tilting on its axis. Without a word, she grabbed her worn denim jacket from behind the counter, already moving toward the door. The store owner, Mrs. Henderson, waved them off with understanding in her eyes. The ride to St. Michael's Medical Center was a blur of streetlights and silent prayers. Ray's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned pale, while Naomi clutched her mother's necklace, a simple silver chain with a small heart pendant that hadn't left her neck since the funeral 5 years ago. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos. Forms were filled out, questions answered, and then came the waiting, endless waiting. Naomi paced the sterile hallway, her boots making soft sounds against the linoleum floor. Ray sat still as stone, his eyes fixed on the double doors leading to the operating rooms. It was past midnight when Dr. Elias Nathaniel Hartley emerged, his surgical cap still on, revealing hints of sandy brown hair underneath. His presence commanded attention, tall and broad-shouldered, with steel blue eyes that held both authority and something deeper, something almost haunted. "Mr. Brooks," his voice was deep, measured. "Your mother's condition was critical, an aortic dissection that required immediate intervention. The surgery was complex, but..." He paused, and Naomi felt her heart stop. "We were able to repair the tear. She's stable now." The relief that flooded through Naomi made her knees weak. Ray stood up, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you for saving my mama." Dr. Hartley nodded, his professional mask firmly in place, but for a moment, just a fraction of a second, his eyes met Naomi's, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred souls who carried their depths quietly. The following days brought a parade of medical staff, but Dr. Hartley's rounds were different. He spoke with precise care, explaining every detail to Marva with respect that went beyond mere bedside manner. Naomi noticed how he adjusted Marva's pillows himself instead of calling a nurse, how his hands, capable of such delicate surgical work, were equally gentle when checking her grandmother's vitals. One morning, Naomi arrived early, carrying her usual notebook filled with scattered thoughts and borrowed poetry. She found Dr. Hartley already there, studying Marva's charts with intense focus. His tailored shirt and tie were immaculate, but dark circles under his eyes betrayed long hours of dedication. "You should rest sometimes, Dr. Hartley," she said softly, surprising herself with her boldness. He looked up, and for a moment, his professional facade cracked just slightly. "I rest when my patients are safe, Ms. Brooks." "Naomi," she corrected gently. "Everyone calls me Naomi." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Naomi." The way he said her name made it sound like poetry. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Ray and Naomi sat in Dr. Hartley's office, facing down numbers that seemed to multiply on the page before them. The hospital bill was astronomical. Even with insurance, the specialized procedure and extended stay had created a mountain of debt that seemed insurmountable. Ray's voice was heavy with dignity as he spoke. "Doctor, my mother's life is worth more than any amount of money, but I'm a simple man with a simple job. I need to propose something." Dr. Hartley leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "My daughter," Ray continued, his voice catching. "She has a gift for healing hearts in her own way. Maybe she could help around here, not as payment exactly, but as a gesture of gratitude. Of course, only if she's willing. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Hartley's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, as if processing not just the words but their implications. His jaw tightened, and Naomi could see him wrestling with something internal. Naomi's heart raced, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I want to help, not because I have to, but because I choose to. She met Dr. Hartley's gaze directly. Sometimes the best way to say thank you is with time, not money. Dr. Hartley stood up, moving to look out his office window. The setting sun painted Newark's skyline in shades of gold and purple. When he turned back, his face was composed, but his eyes held a storm of emotions. "And this is highly unconventional," he said finally, but he looked at Naomi again, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened imperceptibly. "We could arrange for a volunteer position, official paperwork, proper channels. Nothing inappropriate." Ray's shoulders sagged with relief, but Naomi barely noticed. She was too caught up in the way Dr. Hartley's voice had changed on that last word, as if he needed to convince himself more than them. As they left his office that evening, Naomi glanced back. Dr. Hartley stood at his desk, one hand resting on a framed photograph she couldn't quite see. The last rays of sunlight filtered through his window, casting long shadows across the floor, and for a moment he looked utterly alone. That night, lying in her childhood bed, Naomi wrote in her notebook, "Sometimes destiny doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed in surgical scrubs, carrying both salvation and storms in its hands." She couldn't have known then how true those words would prove to be. Monday morning arrived with the smell of antiseptic and fresh coffee. Naomi stood in front of St. Michael's Medical Center, her volunteer badge pinned carefully to her flowing floral dress. The rising sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and she found herself counting her breaths, a habit she'd developed whenever nervousness threatened to overwhelm her. Inside her messenger bag, a fresh notebook waited, along with the novel she'd been reading during her breaks at the bookstore. Old habits died hard, and books had always been her comfort zone. The hospital, with its maze of corridors and beeping machines, was anything but. The volunteer coordinator, a kind-faced woman named Beverly, led Naomi through orientation with efficient warmth. "Dr. Hartley specifically requested you for the cardiac ward," Beverly mentioned, her eyes curious but discreet. "He rarely takes an interest in our volunteer program." Naomi's heart skipped at the mention of his name, but she kept her expression neutral. "I just want to help where I'm needed," she replied softly, adjusting her mother's necklace. The cardiac ward operated like a well-oiled machine, and Dr. Hartley was clearly its masterpiece of precision. Naomi watched from the nurse's station as he made his rounds, his tall frame moving with purpose from room to room. His interactions with patients were perfectly calibrated, professional yet reassuring, distant yet attentive. When he finally approached her, his presence seemed to fill the entire hallway. "Mrs. Brooks," he nodded, then caught himself. "Naomi, Beverly will show you the filing system. We keep detailed records of patient recovery progress." He paused, his steel blue eyes lingering on her face for a moment too long. "Organization is crucial here, like arranging books by color." The words slipped out before she could stop them, a small act of defiance against his rigid structure. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or amusement. "This isn't a bookstore," he replied, but his tone held less edge than she'd expected. "Lives depend on our precision." Throughout the morning, Naomi learned the hospital's rhythms. She organized files, assisted nurses with non-medical tasks, and helped patients find their way through the labyrinthine corridors. But she also did what came naturally. She listened to the elderly man in room 204 who missed his garden, to the teenage girl recovering from heart surgery who dreamed of becoming a dancer, to the worried mother in the waiting room who couldn't stop twisting her wedding ring. Dr. Hartley noticed. She caught him watching her several times, his expression unreadable. During lunch break, she sat in the small hospital garden, writing in her notebook. The words flowed easily. Observations, fragments of conversations, the way sunlight played through the leaves above her. "You write a lot." His voice startled her. Dr. Hartley stood at the garden entrance, his white coat impossibly crisp despite the long morning. Naomi closed her notebook slowly. "It helps me process things, understand people better." He moved closer, taking a seat on the bench opposite her. "And what have you understood about this place so far?" She considered her answer carefully. that everyone here is carrying a story. Not just medical histories, but real stories, hopes, fears, dreams. She met his gaze steadily. Even the doctors. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Medical histories are what save lives, Ms. Brooks. Stories are distracting, Naomi, she corrected again, more firmly this time. And sometimes stories are what keep people fighting, give them a reason to heal. A shadow crossed his face, and he stood abruptly. Your shift ends at 4. Please ensure all files are properly organized before you leave. He turned to go, then paused. Your grandmother's recovery is progressing well. She's stronger than most. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of tasks and quiet observations. Naomi noticed the small details about Dr. Hartley that his precise exterior couldn't hide. How he always used the same blue pen, how his shoulders carried tension like armor, how he softened almost imperceptibly when speaking to elderly patients. At precisely 4 o'clock, she prepared to leave, her files meticulously organized. A post-it note caught her eye. Dr. Hartley's next surgery schedule. Without quite knowing why, she pulled out one of her paper napkins and wrote, "Remember to breathe. Healing goes both ways." She slipped it between the pages, a small act of rebellion against his world of strict order. That evening, visiting her grandmother, Naomi found Marva more spirited than usual. That Dr. Hartley, Marva mused, her wise eyes twinkling, reminds me of your grandfather when I first met him. All starch and structure on the outside, oceans of feeling underneath. Grandma, Naomi protested, but Marva continued. I saw how he looked at you this morning, child, like a man who's forgotten the taste of sunlight, suddenly remembering. Naomi busied herself adjusting Marva's pillows. He's my supervisor, Grandma, and we have an arrangement. Arrangements of the mind rarely consult with matters of the heart, Marva replied cryptically, patting Naomi's hand. Later that night, driving home with her father, Naomi broke their comfortable silence. Dad, are you sure about this, about me volunteering there? Ray kept his eyes on the road, but his voice was thick with emotion. Baby girl, when your mama died, I learned something important. Sometimes the greatest acts of love look strange to the outside world, but if your heart knows it's right. He trailed off, then added softly, I trust you, Naomi. Always have. At home, Naomi stood before her mirror, really looking at herself. Her curls were slightly messy from the long day, her floral dress wrinkled, but there was something different in her eyes, a spark of challenge, of possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Beverly. Doctor, Hartley asked if you could come in early tomorrow. Staff meeting at 7 a.m. Naomi's fingers hovered over the phone. Finally, she typed, I'll be there. In her notebook that night, she wrote, some people build walls with silence, others with precision, but every wall has a door if you look carefully enough. The trick is finding the courage to knock. She fell asleep, wondering if Dr. Hartley had found her note yet, and what stories he carried behind his carefully constructed facade. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new silences to interpret, new spaces between words to navigate. Outside her window, Newark's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and somewhere in the city, in his impeccably organized apartment, Dr. Elias Hartley held a paper napkin in his hands, reading its message over and over, his carefully ordered world shifting ever so slightly on its axis. The staff meeting started precisely at 7 a.m., just as the first rays of dawn painted the hospital windows in shades of gold. Naomi sat quietly in the back of the conference room, her notebook open but untouched, watching Dr. Hartley command the space with effortless authority. He wore a charcoal grey suit today, his tie a deep blue that matched the stormy color of his eyes. Patient satisfaction scores are up 12%, he announced, clicking through his presentation. But we can do better. His gaze swept the room, pausing briefly when it reached Naomi. She noticed dark circles under his eyes, barely visible beneath his composed exterior. After the meeting, as others filed out, he approached her desk. You've been leaving notes, he said, his voice low. It wasn't a question. Naomi met his gaze steadily. Does that interfere with hospital protocol, Dr. Hartley? Elias, he said suddenly, surprising them both. When we're not in front of patients or staff, you can call me Elias. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. And no, the notes don't interfere. They're unexpected. A small victory cracked through his perfect facade. Naomi smiled, just slightly. Sometimes unexpected things are exactly what we need. Their conversation was interrupted by a code blue announcement. Naomi watched as Elias transformed instantly, his momentary vulnerability replaced by laser focus as he rushed toward the emergency. She found herself holding her breath until, nearly an hour later, he emerged from the patient's room, his shoulders carrying the weight of another life saved. That afternoon she found him in his office, staring at a framed photograph on his desk. From her angle, she could finally see it clearly, a young woman with his same blue-gray eyes, laughing at the camera. "My sister," he said without looking up. "Catherine, she would have liked you." The past tense hung heavy in the air. Naomi stepped into the office, closing the door softly behind her. "Tell me about her." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She loved poetry. Used to leave notes everywhere, like you do." His voice caught slightly. "She died 8 years ago. Car accident. I was the attending surgeon. But I couldn't." He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. Naomi moved closer, her heart aching. "That's why you're so careful now. Why everything has to be perfect." "Perfection saves lives," he replied automatically, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "And what about the life you're living?" The words were gentle, but they hit their mark. Elias looked up, really looked at her, and for the first time, his walls were completely down. "I don't know how to do this any other way," he admitted quietly. Before she could respond, Beverly knocked on the door with urgent lab results. The moment shattered, and Dr. Hartley's professional mask slipped back into place. But something had shifted between them, like a key turning in a long-rusted lock. Over the next few weeks, small changes appeared in their daily interactions. Elias began taking his coffee breaks in the garden when Naomi was there. She noticed he'd started using colored tabs in his patient files, a tiny concession to her influence. Sometimes she caught him reading her notes, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. One rainy evening, as Naomi was preparing to leave, Elias appeared at her desk. "Have dinner with me," he said abruptly. Not because of our arrangement, just dinner." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Naomi considered his request. "People will talk," she said finally. "Let them." His voice was firm. "I'm tired of letting fear of what others might think dictate my life." They ended up at a small Italian restaurant 10 blocks from the hospital. Elias looked different outside of work, more human somehow, in his casual black sweater and dark jeans. Over pasta and wine, he told her about growing up in Boston, about medical school, about Catherine's love for spontaneous road trips. In return, Naomi shared stories about her mother's garden, about arranging books by color, about her dreams of writing stories that matter. When she spoke about her father's quiet strength, Elias listened with an intensity that made her heart race. "You see the world differently," he said as they walked back to their cars. "It's unsettling. Good unsettling or bad unsettling? Both." He stopped walking, turning to face her. The streetlight caught the silver in his hair, and Naomi realized with a start how young he looked when he wasn't carrying the weight of his profession. "You make me question everything I've built my life around." "Maybe some things need questioning," she replied softly. He reached out, touching her cheek with careful fingers. "This isn't part of the arrangement," he whispered. "No," she agreed. "This is something else entirely." The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and danger. Then Elias stepped back, his hand falling to his side. "I should get back. Early surgery tomorrow." Naomi nodded, understanding the retreat, but as she drove home, her mind kept returning to the way his fingers had felt against her skin, warm, certain, healing. At home, she found her father still up, watching old westerns with the sound low. "You're home later, baby girl," he said, studying her face. "Had dinner with Dr. Hartley," she replied honestly. "Dad, I think. I think this is becoming something we didn't expect." Ray was quiet for a long moment. "Life rarely gives us what we expect, Naomi. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead." He squeezed her hand. "Just be careful with your heart." And his. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She wrote in her notebook until the words blurred. "We build our walls for protection, line them with protocols and procedures, pretend they keep us safe. But love doesn't care about walls. It seeps through the cracks, grows in the shadows, until one day we look up and realize our carefully constructed fortress has become a garden instead." Across town, in his minimalist apartment, Elias stood at his window, holding Catherine's photograph. "You'd laugh at me now, wouldn't you?" he whispered to his sister's smiling face. All my careful plans undone by a girl who writes notes on napkins. For the first time in 8 years, the thought made him smile too. The morning shift at St. Michael's buzzed with an undercurrent of whispers. Naomi felt the stares as she walked through the cardiac ward, her volunteer badge catching the fluorescent light. The usual friendly smiles from the nursing staff had turned guarded, their conversations falling silent as she passed. She found out why when she reached the break room. 2 nurses quickly separated from their huddle, but not before she caught fragments of their conversation. Dinner with Dr. Hartley, and because of her grandmother's bills. The coffee in her cup suddenly felt cold. Naomi's fingers instinctively went to her mother's necklace, seeking comfort in its familiar shape. She'd known this might happen, but the reality of being the subject of hospital gossip still stung. "Don't let them get to you." Beverly appeared beside her, her kind face serious. "Our people always talk when they don't understand something." "What exactly don't they understand?" Naomi asked quietly. Beverly gave her a knowing look. "How someone like him could fall for someone like you, or maybe how someone like you could see past his walls." She squeezed Naomi's arm. "Either way, they're asking the wrong questions." Before Naomi could respond, Elias's voice cut through the morning buzz. He stood in the doorway, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Staff meeting, now." The break room emptied quickly, leaving only Naomi behind. She started to follow, but Elias caught her arm gently. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, concerned. "People are talking," she said simply. His jaw tightened. "I know. I heard the rumors this morning." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as frustration. "This isn't what I wanted for you. What did you want?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meanings. Before he could answer, his pager buzzed. "Another emergency? Always another emergency." "We'll talk later," he promised, already moving toward the door. But he paused, turning back. "Naomi, what they're saying, it's not true. You know that, right?" She nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't ease. Because while the rumors about arrangements and payments were false, something else was undeniably true. She was falling in love with him. The day stretched endlessly. Naomi threw herself into her work, organizing files with extra precision, helping patients with renewed dedication. But she couldn't escape the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. During her lunch break, she retreated to their garden spot, only to find Dr. Monica Reeves, the head of cardiology, waiting for her. "Miss Brooks," Dr. Reeves began, her tone professionally neutral, "I think we need to discuss your position here." Naomi straightened her spine. "My work has been satisfactory, hasn't it?" "Your work isn't the issue." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Your relationship with Dr. Hartley, however, is professional," Naomi interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "Is complicated," Dr. Reeves corrected. "The hospital has certain ethical guidelines which we haven't broken." Elias's voice cut through the tension. He stood at the garden entrance, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Dr. Reeves, I believe we have a department meeting to attend." After Dr. Reeves left, Elias paced the small garden. "I should have anticipated this, should have protected you better." "I don't need protection," Naomi said quietly. "I need—" She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "What do you need, Naomi?" The moment was interrupted by his phone ringing, the transplant coordinator with an urgent case. Elias answered, his doctor's mask sliding back into place, but his free hand found hers and squeezed it briefly before he left. That evening, visiting her grandmother, Naomi found unexpected solace. Marva was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Child," she said, patting the bed beside her, "come tell your grandma what's troubling you." The whole story spilled out, the rumors, the stares, Dr. Reeves's warning. Marva listened silently, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "You know what I see," she finally said. "I see a man who spent years building walls so high he forgot what the sun feels like. And I see my granddaughter, who's always had a gift for growing flowers in the darkest places." She touched Naomi's cheek. "But gardens need sunshine to grow, baby. And right now, you're both standing in the shadows." Later that night, Naomi found Elias in his office, surrounded by patient files. He looked tired, the weight of the day evident in the set of his shoulders. "We need to talk," she said softly. He looked up, and for a moment, she saw past his defenses, saw the man who missed his sister, who carried the weight of every life he couldn't save, who was terrified of letting anyone too close. "I know," he replied, standing, "but not here, not anymore." They drove separately to a small park overlooking the city. Newark's lights sparkled below them like earthbound stars, and a cool breeze carried the promise of autumn. "I've spent 8 years building this life," Elias began, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything in its place, everything under control. Then you walked in with your colored files and your paper notes and your way of seeing right through me. And now, he turned to face her. "Now I can't remember why I thought control was more important than feeling alive." Naomi's heart raced. "The hospital can adapt." His voice was firm. "I'm not letting them dictate this, not letting fear win again." "What are you saying, Elias?" He reached for her hand, his surgeon's fingers intertwining with hers. "I'm saying I want to know what happens when we stop pretending this is just an arrangement, when we admit that something extraordinary is happening here. People will still talk," she warned. "Let them." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "They can talk about how the rigid doctor—" Hartley finally learned that not everything in life can be controlled, about how sometimes the best healing happens in ways we never expected. Under the stars, with the city lights below and the truth finally spoken between them, Naomi felt something shift in her universe. This wasn't the end of their complications. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new whispers, new battles to fight. But for now, in this moment, she let herself believe in possibilities. In gardens growing through concrete, in love that defied expectations and arrangements, and carefully constructed walls. In her notebook that night, she wrote, "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that our hearts have plans of their own, that love doesn't follow protocols or procedures, it simply grows wild and beautiful in whatever space we dare to give it." The morning after their conversation in the park, everything at St. Michael's felt different. Naomi walked through the familiar corridors with her head held high, noticing how the whispers had evolved from speculation to certainty. Her volunteer badge seemed to catch more light than usual, drawing attention she both welcomed and feared. Dr. Reeves was waiting by the nurses' station, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Brooks, the hospital board would like to meet with you and Dr. Hartley today at noon." Naomi's stomach tightened, but her voice remained steady. "We'll be there." She found Elias in the surgical prep room, reviewing charts for his morning procedure. He looked up as she entered, and his face softened in a way that made her heart skip. "Good morning," he said, the simple greeting carrying worlds of meaning. "The board wants to see us at noon," she said without preamble. He nodded, unsurprised. "I expected this." Setting down his charts, he moved closer, his voice dropping. "Whatever happens in that meeting, remember what I said last night. No more hiding." The morning passed in a blur of tension and anticipation. Naomi buried herself in work, but her mind kept drifting to worst-case scenarios. At 11:45, she headed to the boardroom, her notebook clutched like a shield. Elias was already there, looking formidable in his dark suit. He stood when she entered, a subtle gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the board members filing in. Dr. Reeves sat at the head of the table, flanked by administrators and legal representatives. "Dr. Hartley," Dr. Reeves began, "your reputation at this hospital is exemplary. Your surgical success rate, your research contributions, your leadership in the cardiac unit, all outstanding." She paused, "which makes this situation particularly delicate." "What situation exactly?" Elias's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Your relationship with Miss Brooks began as an arrangement regarding her grandmother's medical bills. Now it appears to have evolved into something personal. The ethical implications are non-existent," Elias interrupted. "The original arrangement was above board, properly documented, and involved volunteer work through official channels. As for my personal life," he looked at Naomi, his eyes softening, "that's exactly what it is, personal." One of the administrators cleared his throat. "Dr. Hartley, surely you understand our concerns about appearances." "Appearances?" Naomi found her voice, surprising everyone, including herself. "Let's talk about appearances, about how a dedicated surgeon who saves lives daily is being questioned because he dared to show humanity, about how this hospital, which claims to care about healing, is more concerned with gossip than with the fact that Dr. Hartley's patient satisfaction scores have improved 20% since we started working together. The room fell silent. Elias was looking at her with a mixture of pride and amazement. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Miss Brooks, no one is questioning Dr. Hartley's medical excellence, but there are protocols, which we've followed," Elias cut in. "It's on every step documented, every hour logged, but if you're asking me to choose between my position here and being honest about my feelings for Naomi," he stood, his full height commanding attention, "then perhaps it's time to discuss my resignation." "Elias, no?" Naomi whispered, but he continued. "I've given 8 years to this hospital, sacrificed relationships, personal life, everything for the job. And I was fine with that until Naomi showed me there's more to healing than perfect procedures and controlled environments." A new voice spoke up, Dr. William Porter, the eldest board member. "When I started practicing medicine 50 years ago," he said slowly, "we understood that healing happens in mysterious ways, that sometimes the best medicine isn't in our protocols." He looked at Naomi. "I've watched you with our patients, young lady. You bring something to these halls that no procedure manual could teach." The tension in the room shifted. Dr. Reeves sat back, studying them both with new eyes. "Perhaps," she said finally, "we've been approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of seeing a problem to solve, we should be examining how this partnership has benefited our patients." Relief flooded through Naomi, but the meeting wasn't over. For the next hour, they discussed new guidelines, proper documentation, and professional boundaries. When they finally emerged, Elias looked drained but determined. "You were incredible in there," he said softly as they walked to the garden. "I've never seen anyone stand up to the board like that. I learned from the best," she smiled. "A certain surgeon taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what matters." In the garden, their sanctuary, autumn leaves danced around them. Elias took her hands in his, and she noticed they were trembling slightly. "I meant what I said in there. I would have resigned." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I love you." The words slipped out naturally, inevitably, like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. Elias's eyes widened, then softened with an emotion she'd never seen before. "Say that again," he breathed. "I love you. Stronger this time. Certain." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you too. God help me. I've loved you since you first rearranged my filing system by color." Their laughter mixed with the rustle of leaves, a moment of pure joy in the midst of chaos. But reality wasn't far behind. His pager buzzed with an urgent call from the ER. "Go," she said, understanding in her eyes. "Save lives. I'll be here." That evening, visiting Marva, Naomi found her grandmother looking particularly pleased. "Word travels fast in hospitals," Marva said, patting the bed beside her. "Tell me everything." As Naomi recounted the board meeting, Marva's eyes sparkled with pride. "You stood your ground, baby girl. Just like your mama would have." "I was terrified," Naomi admitted. "Course you were. Love's always terrifying. But the real ones, they're worth the fear." Later that night, after a lengthy surgery, Elias found Naomi waiting in his office. She'd left one of her paper notes on his desk. "Some hearts need scalpels to heal. Others need poetry. The best doctors know how to use both." He pulled her into his arms, the scent of hospital antiseptic mixing with her natural warmth. "I don't deserve you," he murmured into her hair. "Good thing love isn't about deserving," she replied. "It's about choosing, and I choose you, complicated history and all." In her notebook that night, Naomi wrote, "Today we faced the world and didn't blink. Today we chose love over fear, truth over appearances, growth over safety. Today we learned that sometimes the strongest hearts are the ones brave enough to crack open and let the light in." Across town, Elias added a splash of color to his normally monochrome apartment, a small vase of wildflowers on his kitchen counter, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life don't follow any protocol at all. The transition from secret to public relationship brought its own kind of chaos to St. Michael's. Naomi noticed how patients now smiled knowingly when Dr. Hartley made his rounds, how they watched their interactions with romantic interest, usually reserved for TV dramas. Even the nurses who had once whispered behind their backs now seemed invested in their story. "You've humanized him," Beverly commented one morning, watching Elias laugh at something Naomi had said. "I've worked here 6 years and never saw him smile like that before you came along." But with visibility came scrutiny. Every interaction was observed, every professional decision questioned. Elias felt it most acutely during a difficult case consultation when Dr. Reeves pointedly asked if his judgment might be emotionally compromised these days. His response was to work even harder, take on more surgeries, stay later at the hospital. Naomi watched with growing concern as the shadows under his eyes darkened. "You don't have to prove anything," she told him one evening, finding him slumped over paperwork in his office. "Don't I?" He looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "They're all waiting for me to slip up, to show that love has made me soft, less precise." Naomi perched on the edge of his desk. "Being human doesn't make you less of a surgeon. It makes you a better one." He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I listen to hearts," she smiled. "It's kind of our thing now." Their moment was interrupted by a knock. Ray stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in the hospital setting but determined. "Dr. Hartley," he said formally. "Think we need to have a talk." Naomi started to protest, but Elias squeezed her hand. "He's right. We do." She left them alone, her heart racing. Through the office window, she watched her father, still in his delivery uniform, sitting across from one of Newark's top surgeons. Two men from different worlds, connected by their love for her. Later that night, Ray told her about their conversation over dinner at home. "He's a good man, baby girl, scared of messing up, just like I was with your mama. But he loves you something fierce." "What exactly did you talk about?" Ray smiled, a rare full smile that reminded her of easier days. About how loving a Brooks woman requires courage, about how sometimes the hardest part of love is letting it change you. The next morning, Naomi found something unexpected on her desk, a small box with a note in Elias's precise handwriting. "Lunch in the garden. There's something I want to show you." She waited until noon, curiosity building. Elias appeared right on time, looking nervous but determined. In the privacy of their garden, he pulled out his phone and pressed play. The sounds of jazz filled the air, not his usual classical music, but something warmer, more spontaneous. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." Naomi stared at him. "Here. Now. Catherine used to say I was too rigid, too afraid to dance." His voice softened. "Your father reminded me that sometimes love requires stepping out of our comfort zone." In the middle of their hospital garden, surrounded by autumn flowers and medical scrubs, they danced. Elias was surprisingly graceful, leading her in slow circles as healthcare workers passed by with hidden smiles. "You're full of surprises, Dr. Hartley," she teased. "You inspire me to try new things," he murmured, "to be brave in ways I'd forgotten how to be." Their dance was interrupted by his pager, a cardiac emergency requiring immediate surgery. But before he rushed off, he kissed her, right there in the garden, not caring who saw. That afternoon, Naomi visited Marva, who was getting stronger every day. Her grandmother took one look at her glowing face and laughed. "That man finally learned to dance, didn't he?" "How did you know?" "Because that's the look of a woman whose man just proved he'd move mountains for her." Marva adjusted her position in bed. "Now tell me, when's he coming to Sunday dinner?" The question caught Naomi off guard. Sunday dinners were sacred in their family, a tradition her mother had maintained until her last days. They hadn't invited anyone new since she passed. I haven't asked him yet," she admitted. "Well, it's time. A man needs to know he's got family standing behind him when he's learning to be brave." That evening, Naomi found Elias in the recovery room, checking on his emergency surgery patient, a teenage boy who'd collapsed during basketball practice. The boy's parents hovered nearby, their faces etched with worry. She watched as Elias explained the procedure, not just with his usual precision, but with genuine warmth. He spoke to the boy directly, not over him, and promised to come watch him play once he recovered. "You're different with them," she observed later as they walked to his car. "I'm trying to see them the way you do," he admitted, "not just as cases, but as stories, lives intertwined with others." In the parking lot, under a sky turning purple with dusk, she asked him about Sunday dinner. His face registered surprise, then understanding of what the invitation meant. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "I know how important those dinners are to your family." "You're important to me," she replied simply. "And my dad actually likes you, which is a minor miracle." He laughed, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about us, about the future." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of nervousness. "So I know it's fast, but nothing about us has followed the normal timeline." "Elias," she interrupted gently, Are you trying to ask me something? Not yet, he smiled. But soon. I want you to know I'm all in. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, I'm all in. That night, Naomi added a new entry to her notebook. Love isn't just about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it's in the small brave moments, learning to dance, joining family dinners, letting your heart lead instead of your head. Sometimes the greatest love stories are written in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet decisions to grow, to change, to become more than we ever thought possible. In his apartment, Elias stood at his window, looking out at the city lights. Catherine's photo sat on his desk, but tonight it didn't bring the usual pain. Instead, he could almost hear her laughing approval. "Finally, big brother, you finally learned to dance." He smiled, touching the small velvet box hidden in his desk drawer. Soon, but not yet. First, there was Sunday dinner to survive, and a family to join, and a whole new way of healing to learn. But for the first time in 8 years, the future looked less like a carefully planned surgery, and more like a dance, unpredictable, beautiful, and worth every uncertain step. Sunday arrived, wrapped in autumn gold, crisp leaves dancing across the Brooks family's modest front yard. Naomi stood in her childhood kitchen, surrounded by the familiar scents of her mother's recipes, collard greens simmering on the stove, mac and cheese bubbling in the oven, and her grandmother's secret recipe peach cobbler cooling on the counter. "Child, you've checked that cobbler 6 times in the last hour," Marva observed from her wheelchair. The doctors had finally cleared her for short trips home, and she'd insisted on supervising the Sunday dinner preparations. "So it won't bake any better with you hovering. I just want everything to be perfect," Naomi admitted, adjusting her mother's apron strings. "Perfect is boring," Marva declared. "Love needs a little mess to grow properly." Ray appeared in the doorway, freshly showered and wearing his good shirt. "Baby girl, stop fussing. That doctor of yours isn't coming for the food." Before Naomi could respond, the doorbell rang. Her heart jumped as she heard Elias's voice in the entryway, carrying the deep tone of nervousness he tried so hard to hide. She found him standing in their living room, looking both immaculate and slightly out of place in dark jeans and a navy sweater that brought out his eyes. In his hands, he held a bouquet of wildflowers and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. "I wasn't sure what to bring," he admitted quietly. "Catherine always said I was terrible at family gatherings." Naomi took the flowers, breathing in their sweet scent. "Just be yourself. That's who we invited." Ray stepped forward, extending his hand. "Doc, glad you could make it." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of acceptance. Marva wheeled herself into the room, her eyes sharp with assessment. "So, you're the man who saved my life and stole my granddaughter's heart." She gestured him closer. "Come, let me get a proper look at you." Elias knelt beside her wheelchair, and something in the gesture, the way he naturally adjusted to her eye level, showing the same respect he gave his patients, made Naomi's heart swell. "Mom," he said softly, "your granddaughter saved me right back." Marva's face softened. "Well, now, seems you do know the right things to say." She patted his hand. "And it's Marva, not Mom. We're family here." The word family hung in the air, rich with meaning. Naomi watched as Elias blinked rapidly, emotion flickering across his usually composed face. Dinner was a revelation. Ray blessed the food with words about gratitude and new beginnings. Elias, initially stiff with uncertainty, gradually relaxed as stories flowed around the table. He listened intently, as Marva described meeting her husband, as Ray shared memories of Naomi's mother, as family history unfolded in waves of laughter and nostalgia. "Tell us about your sister," Marva said suddenly, her intuition razor-sharp as always. "Naomi mentions her sometimes." Instead of freezing up as he usually did at mentions of Catherine, Elias reached for Naomi's hand under the table. "She would have loved this," he said quietly. "Just the noise and the laughter, the way you all take care of each other. She always said I needed more chaos in my life." "Smart girl," Marva nodded. "Sometimes the best medicine is a little disorder." After dinner, while Ray and Marva settled in the living room, Naomi led Elias to the kitchen to help with dishes, another family tradition. He rolled up his sleeves without hesitation, looking surprisingly natural, with soapy hands and a dish towel over his shoulder. "For your mother's photos," he said, nodding toward the wall of frames. "She had your smile." "Dad says that all the time." Naomi handed him another plate. "It's strange. I used to worry about forgetting her, but being here, cooking her recipes, sharing them with you, it's like she's still teaching me things." Elias set down the dish towel, turning to face her. "I've been so afraid of memories," he admitted, "keeping everything sterile, controlled. But your family, you don't just remember, you celebrate. You make love bigger than loss." From the living room, they heard Marva's laugh, mixing with Ray's deeper chuckle, the sound of family, of home, of belonging. "I want this," Elias said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just you, though God knows you're more than I ever dreamed of, but this. Family dinners and shared stories and dishes that taste like memories." Naomi touched his face, feeling the slight tremor in his jaw. "You already have it. You're already part of this." Their moment was interrupted by Ray appearing in the doorway. "Doc, want to help me check the game scores?" The invitation was casual, but Naomi recognized it for what it was, her father offering Elias a place in their Sunday rituals. As she watched them settle into the living room, Ray explaining his complex system for tracking multiple games, she felt her mother's presence strongly. "He's the one, isn't he, Mama?" she whispered to the quiet kitchen. The evening breeze through the window seemed to whisper back, carrying the scent of her mother's favorite flowers from the garden. Later, as the sun set and cast long shadows through the windows, Marva insisted on sending Elias home with leftovers. "I can't have you living on hospital cafeteria food," she declared, packing containers with practiced efficiency. "A man needs proper meals to do proper healing." As they said their goodbyes, Ray pulled Elias aside for a private word. Naomi couldn't hear what was said, but she saw the emotion on both men's faces, saw the way her father squeezed Elias's shoulder, the same gesture he used with her when words weren't enough. In the driveway, before leaving, Elias held her close. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For showing me what family really means, for making me brave enough to want it again." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Naomi found a note Elias had slipped into her notebook. "Some surgeries heal the heart. Some families rebuild it. Thank you for giving me both." She added her own entry beneath it. "Love isn't just about two people finding each other. It's about circles widening, tables expanding, hearts making room for more stories, more laughter, more life. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't in the healing, it's in the belonging." Across town, Elias sat in his apartment, surrounded by containers of home-cooked food. He held Catherine's photo in one hand and the small velvet box in the other. "You were right, Kath," he whispered. "Sometimes the best things in life don't come with instructions. Sometimes they come with a Sunday dinner invitation and the courage to say yes." October painted Newark in shades of amber and gold, and St. Michael's bustled with its usual rhythm of life and death, but something was different about Dr. Elias Hartley. The nurses noticed it first, how he'd pause at the windows, lost in thought, or how his phone would light up with texts that made him smile in the middle of rounds. "He's going to propose," Beverly whispered to Naomi one morning, catching her arranging files. "I saw him looking at his phone during lunch, jeweler's website." Naomi's heart fluttered, but she kept her voice steady. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But signs were everywhere. Elias had been having long phone conversations in private, disappearing during breaks, and asking subtle questions about her favorite things. Even Ray seemed to be in on something, sharing knowing looks with Elias during their now regular Sunday dinners. The morning everything changed started normally enough. Naomi arrived early, coffee in hand, to find the cardiac ward in controlled chaos. A major accident on the turnpike had brought in multiple trauma cases, and Elias had been in surgery since dawn. "He's been going for 6 hours straight," Dr. Reeves informed her, respect evident in her tone. 3 back-to-back procedures, critical cases. Naomi stationed herself near the OR board, tracking his surgeries while handling her regular duties. Around noon, Beverly brought her lunch, but she couldn't eat. Something felt different about today, charged with possibility and tension. Finally, at 3 in the afternoon, Elias emerged from his last surgery. He looked exhausted, but triumphant. "All stable," he announced to the waiting staff. "Good work, everyone." His eyes found Naomi's across the room, and the look they shared made several nurses discreetly turn away, giving them privacy in the crowded hallway. "Dinner tonight?" he asked softly when they had a moment alone. "There's something I want to talk about." Naomi's heart raced, but before she could answer, alarms blared through the ward. Code blue. One of Elias's post-op patients was crashing. Everything happened in slow motion after that. Elias ran toward the room, his tired legs carrying him with practiced urgency. Naomi watched through the window as he worked, his movements precise despite his exhaustion. The patient stabilized, but the close call shook Elias. Naomi found him in his office later, staring at Catherine's photo. "I almost lost him," he said without looking up. 6 hours of surgery, 3 lives saved, and I almost lost him because I was distracted, thinking about... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Naomi moved closer, sensing his struggle. "About what, Elias?" Instead of answering, he pulled open his desk drawer and took out a small velvet box. Naomi's breath caught. "Just this isn't how I planned it," he said quietly. "I had everything arranged. Dinner at that Italian place you love, music, flowers. But today reminded me that life doesn't wait for perfect moments." He stood, moving around the desk to face her. "When Catherine died, I thought I had to choose between being a good doctor and having a full heart. I built walls, created systems, convinced myself that control was the same thing as healing." His hands trembled slightly as he opened the box, revealing a vintage-style ring with a subtle sparkle that caught the office light. "Then you came along with your colored files and paper notes and way of seeing through every defense I'd built. You taught me that the best healing happens when we're brave enough to feel everything, the joy, the fear, the love." Dropping to one knee, he looked up at her with eyes full of certainty despite his exhaustion. "Naomi Elise Brooks, you make me brave enough to want everything. The messy family dinners, the quiet moments between emergencies, the chance to build a life that's both ordered and beautifully chaotic. Will you marry me?" Through tears, Naomi saw their whole story reflected in that moment, the arrangement that became real love, the walls that became bridges, the fear that became courage. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, as if it had been waiting there all along. Their kiss tasted of coffee and hospital antiseptic and promises. The moment was interrupted by applause. They looked up to find the doorway filled with nurses, doctors, and patients who'd gathered to witness the moment. Beverly was openly crying, and even Dr. Reeves wore a subtle smile. "About time," called out Mr. Johnson, one of their regular cardiac patients. "Been watching this love story unfold for months now." Elias laughed, a full, free sound that echoed through the halls. "I suppose we've had quite an audience." News traveled fast. By evening, when they arrived at Ray's house to share their engagement, they found the front porch lit up and Marva waiting with her knowing smile. "Took you long enough, Doctor," she teased, wheeling herself forward to examine the ring. "As though I suspect timing was never your problem, just needed the right courage at the right moment." Ray emerged from the kitchen, wearing his good shirt again, carrying a bottle of champagne he must have bought specially. "Welcome to the family, son," he said simply, pulling Elias into a firm embrace. "For real this time." Later that night, after celebrations and calls to friends and more happy tears than either of them expected, they sat in their garden at the hospital. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the promise of change. "I had a whole speech planned," Elias admitted, playing with her fingers where the ring caught moonlight, "about how you changed everything, how you made this place feel like more than just a hospital." "I like this version better," Naomi smiled. "It's more us, finding beauty in the unplanned moments." From her bag, she pulled out her notebook, opening to a fresh page. Together they wrote, "Sometimes love arrives in perfect packages with ribbons and plans. Sometimes it comes in hospital scrubs after a 30-hour shift, carrying the weight of saved lives and future dreams. Sometimes the most beautiful moments are the ones we don't orchestrate. They simply arrive, like dawn after a long night, reminding us that every heartbeat is a gift, and every love story writes itself in its own perfect time." Above them, the hospital windows glowed with life and healing, and somewhere, they both felt, Catherine was smiling. November arrived with unexpected warmth, as if nature itself was celebrating their engagement. The hospital had transformed from a place of whispers to one of excited planning, nurses slipping Naomi wedding magazines during breaks, patients offering advice about venues, and even Dr. Reeves quietly recommending a caterer who'd done her daughter's wedding. But amidst the joy, life continued its complex dance. Elias was deep in preparations for a groundbreaking, minimally invasive cardiac procedure, while Naomi found herself taking on more responsibilities in the cardiac ward, her natural empathy making her invaluable to both staff and patients. One morning, as Naomi organized files in Elias's office, she found herself staring at Catherine's photo. "I wish I could have known you," she whispered. "You'd probably have so much advice about handling your perfectionist brother." She would have loved planning this wedding. Elias's voice came from the doorway. He looked tired but happy, his surgical cap still on from an early morning procedure. She always said her big brother needed someone to mess up his perfectly ordered world. "Speaking of planning," Naomi began, but was interrupted by Beverly rushing in. "Dr. Hartley, your patient from OR2 is asking for you. She's anxious about tomorrow's procedure." Elias nodded, already moving. "I'll be right there." He paused to kiss Naomi quickly. "Tonight? Dinner at home? We can actually talk wedding details." Home was a new development. They decided to move in together, choosing a cozy apartment halfway between the hospital and her father's house. The space was still a work in progress, Elias's minimalist style gradually blending with Naomi's warmer touches. That evening, surrounded by takeout containers and wedding magazines, they finally had their first real planning discussion. "Spring," Naomi said decisively. "In the hospital garden where everything started." Elias looked up from his laptop, where he'd been creating a characteristically detailed spreadsheet. "The garden. Not too unconventional." "Since when are we conventional?" She moved to sit beside him, closing his laptop gently. "That garden saw every step of our story. Plus, it means Marva won't have to travel far." His face softened at the mention of her grandmother. "Speaking of Marva, her latest tests came back. The surgery's holding beautifully. She'll be dancing at our wedding." The moment was interrupted by both their phones buzzing. A multiple car pileup was bringing several trauma cases to the ER. They moved with practiced efficiency, personal plans set aside for professional duties. Hours later, after all the patients were stabilized, they found themselves in their garden. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of hope. "We should talk about children," Elias said suddenly, his voice carrying both certainty and vulnerability. "I know it's early, but with our schedules, our careers." Naomi took his hand, feeling the slight tremor that always followed long surgeries. "I want them," she said softly. "Maybe not right away, but yes. Little ones with your focus and hopefully my ability to color outside the lines." His laugh was tender. "Poor kids won't know whether to organize their toys alphabetically or by color. They'll figure it out," she smiled, "just like we did." The conversation was cut short by Elias's pager, but it marked a turning point. They began planning not just a wedding, but a future, discussing call schedules, house hunting in family-friendly neighborhoods, dreaming about a life that balanced their calling with their personal happiness. Sunday dinner became wedding planning central, with Marva holding court from her wheelchair, offering opinions on everything from flowers to music. Ray watched it all with quiet joy, occasionally catching Elias for private conversations that left both men emotional but smiling. "Your mother would have loved all this," Ray told Naomi one evening, finding her in the kitchen arranging engagement party invitations. "Well, she always said love was like her garden, needed both structure and room to grow wild." The engagement party itself was a study in their two worlds merging. Hospital staff mingled with family friends, surgical residents chatted with Ray's poker buddies, and Dr. Reeves surprised everyone by bringing her famous homemade punch. But the real moment of truth came when Elias stood to make a speech. Public speaking had never been his strength. He was more comfortable in the focused silence of the OR. Yet here he was, holding a glass with slightly shaking hands, looking at Naomi with eyes full of certainty. 8 years ago," he began, "I thought I knew everything about healing hearts. I had the best training, the steadiest hands, the highest success rates." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "What I didn't know was that sometimes the hearts that need healing most are our own." The room fell silent, caught in the gravity of his words. "Naomi taught me that healing isn't just about procedures and protocols. It's about having the courage to feel, to risk, to love." He turned to face her fully. "You didn't just arrange my files by color. You colored my whole world. Every day, you make me brave enough to want more than perfection. So you make me want real, messy, beautiful life." Naomi stood, tears streaming freely as she joined him. "We make each other brave," she said softly. But in the quiet room, everyone heard. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the cleanup was done, they sat in Ray's backyard under strings of lights that Beverly and the nurses had insisted on hanging. The autumn air was cool, but Elias's arm around her was warm. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, playing with her engagement ring. "When we first made our arrangement," he pulled her closer. "Never. I imagined a professional agreement, a way to handle a difficult situation, I never imagined, he gestured at the yard, where evidence of their celebration still lingered. This family, joy, a future that feels bigger than my past. In her notebook that night, they both wrote, "Love isn't just about two hearts beating in sync. It's about two lives weaving together, creating a pattern more beautiful than either could make alone. It's about finding the courage to build something new while honoring everything that brought us here. Most of all, it's about choosing each other every day in the quiet moments between emergencies and the loud celebrations of joy." They fell asleep surrounded by wedding magazines and hospital schedules, their future spreading out before them like a road made of starlight and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, new moments to balance their calling with their love. But tonight, in the quiet of their new home, they were simply two hearts beating as one, writing their story in the spaces between what was and what would be. Spring bloomed early in Newark, as if nature itself couldn't wait for their wedding day. The hospital garden, once their private sanctuary, had been transformed. White chairs lined the paths, fairy lights twined through the trees, and flowers bloomed in every corner, a perfect blend of Elias's precision and Naomi's free spirit. The morning dawned clear and bright. In her childhood bedroom, Naomi sat before her mirror while Beverly and the nurses fussed with her hair. Her wedding dress, simple, elegant, with delicate lace that reminded her of her mother's, hung by the window, catching the early light. "Something borrowed," Marva announced, wheeling herself into the room. She held out a pearl bracelet, her eyes misty. "Your mother wore this at her wedding. She'd want you to have it today." "Something blue," Beverly added, producing a delicate sapphire pin. "From all of us at the cardiac ward, to match those eyes you fell in love with." Naomi touched her mother's necklace, her something old, and smiled through tears. The something new was the dress itself, chosen with Ray's quiet approval and Elias's sister's enthusiastic support. Across town, in their new home, Elias stood in their bedroom, Catherine's photo propped on the dresser as he adjusted his tie. Ray had insisted on helping him get ready, arriving early with coffee and calm presence. "Never thought I'd be helping a doctor learn to tie a bow tie," Ray chuckled, his steady hands fixing Elias's slightly crooked attempt. "Never thought I'd be lucky enough to have a father-in-law like you," Elias replied softly. The hospital garden filled quickly. Colleagues, patients, family friends. Dr. Reeves directed traffic with the same precision she used in the OR. Mr. Johnson, now fully recovered, served as an unofficial greeter, telling anyone who would listen how he'd watched their love story unfold. When the music started, not the traditional wedding march but the same jazz song they'd first danced to in the garden, Elias took his place under the flower-covered arch. His breath caught as Naomi appeared on Ray's arm. She moved down the aisle like sunshine breaking through clouds, her natural curls crowned with tiny flowers, her smile brighter than any light. Ray kissed her cheek before placing her hand in Elias's, his own eyes shining with tears. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but paused as a light breeze scattered cherry blossoms across the gathering. It felt like a blessing, like Catherine and Naomi's mother were somehow present, adding their joy to the moment. The vows they'd written themselves carried the weight of their unique journey. Elias spoke first, his surgeon's hand steady as they held hers. "Naomi, you came into my life as an arrangement, but you became my revolution. You taught me that the greatest healing happens when we're brave enough to be imperfect, to love without guarantees, to let joy grow wild in the gardens of our hearts. I promise to spend every day learning the courage you've shown me, the courage to feel deeply, to live fully, to love without reservation." Naomi's voice carried clear and strong across the garden they'd made their own. "Elias, you think I changed your world, but you transformed mine too. You showed me that love isn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about choosing each other every day, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. I promise to be your partner in all things, to cherish both your strength and your vulnerability, to keep coloring outside your lines until our life becomes the masterpiece we create together." When they exchanged rings, Marva's quiet tears matched those streaming down Beverly's face. "Even Dr. Reeves dabbed discreetly at her eyes. "By the power vested in me," the minister smiled, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Their kiss was both an ending and a beginning, witnessed by the community that had watched their love grow from uncertain seeds to full bloom. The reception, held in the hospital's transformed conference center, was a celebration of everything their love represented. Residents danced with nurses, Ray taught Elias's family members his poker tricks, and Marva held court at the head table, dispensing wisdom and joy in equal measure. To the bride and groom, Dr. Reeves offered in her toast, who reminded us all that the best medicine isn't always found in medical books. Sometimes it's found in the courage to let love heal what science cannot. As evening fell, Naomi and Elias slipped away to their garden. The fairy lights twinkled like stars, and the spring air carried the scent of new beginnings. "Mrs. Hartley," Elias murmured, pulling her close. "Dr. Brooks Hartley," she corrected with a smile. "I'm keeping both names, just like I'm keeping both parts of our story." He touched the small bump just beginning to show beneath her wedding dress, their secret joy, discovered just weeks before the wedding. "Our story is just beginning," he said softly. "Man and I can't wait to write every chapter with you." From inside, they could hear the celebration continuing. Family and friends, colleagues and patients, all brought together by the unexpected love that had bloomed in a hospital garden. In her notebook, safely tucked away for their future children to read someday, Naomi had written one final entry that morning. "Love doesn't always arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as an arrangement, as a debt to be paid, as a chance to heal others, but when it's real, when it's as real as sunrise and steady hands and hearts beating in sync, it transforms everything it touches. It turns walls into windows, fear into courage, and two separate paths into one shared journey. What remains after love? Everything. Every moment of growth, every lesson in bravery, every quiet triumph and loud celebration. What remains is us, better, stronger, more complete than we were before. What remains is the truth we discovered together, that the greatest healing happens when we're brave enough to let love write our story." Later that night, as they danced under the stars, Elias whispered, "Thank you for rearranging my life." "Thank you for letting me," Naomi replied, her head on his shoulder, her heart full of tomorrow's promises. Above them, the spring stars twinkled like destiny fulfilled, and somewhere, they both knew, Catherine was smiling down on the garden, where love had turned an arrangement into forever. 5 years later, the early morning light filtered through the windows of St. Michael's cardiac ward, where Dr. Elias Brooks Hartley stood reviewing charts. His office, once a monument to minimalism, now held evidence of a life richly lived. Family photos alongside medical awards, children's drawings pinned next to surgical schedules. "Daddy," a small whirlwind in a floral dress, burst through the door, her curls bouncing with each step. Catherine Rose Brooks Hartley, age 4, carried her mother's smile and her father's focused determination. Behind her, Naomi followed more slowly, carrying their 6-month-old son, Raymond James, who dozed peacefully against her shoulder. "There's my morning crew," Elias smiled, lifting Catherine into his arms. She immediately reached for his stethoscope, a familiar ritual. "Want to hear Daddy's heartbeat, Rosebud?" While Catherine listened with serious concentration, Naomi settled into what had become her permanent office next door. After completing her master's degree in hospital administration, she'd been appointed Director of Patient Relations, her natural gift for healing hearts finding new purpose in improving hospital systems. The garden where their love story began had expanded under her care, becoming a healing space that drew patients and staff alike. Even Dr. Reeves had been known to take her coffee breaks there, especially since retiring from surgery and taking on a teaching role. Marva, now approaching 83, still held court at Sunday dinners, dispensing wisdom to a family that had grown in beautiful ways. Ray, semi-retired, but still delivering special packages, spent his free time teaching Catherine how to plant flowers and telling baby Raymond stories about the grandmother he was named after. Dr. Brooks Hartley, Beverly, now the head nurse of the cardiac ward, appeared in the doorway. "Your 9 o'clock patient is here, the one celebrating 5 years post-transplant." Elias nodded, setting Catherine down. The little girl immediately ran to her mother's office, where a special corner had been set up for her books and crayons. Before heading to his patient, Elias paused in Naomi's doorway. She looked up from her work, their eyes meeting in a glance that still carried all the electricity of their first encounters. On her desk sat her old notebook, now filled with years of their story, next to a fresh one waiting for chapters yet to come. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied, their daily ritual as natural as breathing. In the garden that evening, as their children played under the watchful eyes of the nursing staff, Naomi and Elias sat on their favorite bench. The hospital rose behind them, its windows glowing with life and purpose, while before them stretched the future they'd built together, not perfect, but perfectly theirs. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked, watching Catherine show her baby brother a butterfly with gentle hands. "About everything that remains after love," Naomi smiled, squeezing his hand. "All of this, our family, our purpose, our story." Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, twinkling like promises kept and dreams fulfilled. In the distance, the sounds of the hospital continued, monitors beeping, phones ringing, lives being saved and changed. But here in their garden, time stood still, holding them in the perfect moment between what was and what would be. Life wasn't always easy. There were long surgeries and difficult cases, sleepless nights with sick children, and challenging days balancing careers with family. But they faced it all together, their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome, each joy shared, each quiet triumph celebrated. They had learned that love wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about choosing each other every day, in the spaces between heartbeats. It was about building something beautiful from an unexpected beginning. Most of all, it was about the courage to let love write their story, one page at a time, in the endless book of their shared life. And what remained after love? Everything that mattered, everything that healed, everything that made life worth living, just as Naomi had written in that first notebook, so long ago. Sometimes, destiny doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed in surgical scrubs, carrying both salvation and storms in its hands. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to let it, it leads you home. The end. Inspired by this profound love story between Naomi and Elias, which began as an arrangement and turned into something extraordinary, reflect, at what moments in your life has something that seemed to be just an arrangement or an obligation ended up becoming one of the most beautiful and transformative experiences you've ever lived? How has this experience changed the way you see love and human relationships? Abandoned by her rich husband and pregnant with twins, but the doctor saved her life forever. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The pregnancy test hadn't stopped shaking in her hands, even after 30 minutes. Monroe Hale sat alone in the sterile waiting room of Baltimore Memorial Hospital, her oversized Ravens t-shirt stretched across her 20-week belly, wondering how a piece of plastic could hold so much weight. 2 pink lines, 2 babies, and 0 partners. The evening light filtering through the hospital windows cast long shadows across the empty chairs, each one a reminder of the space beside her, where Graham should have been. The same Graham who'd smiled through their wedding vows last spring, who'd talked about their future family over morning coffee, who'd left a post-it note reading, "Following my dreams," on their refrigerator 3 weeks ago. The same Graham who hadn't answered a single call since. Monroe adjusted her position on the hard plastic chair, her hand instinctively moving to cradle her growing bump. The gold earrings her mother had given her for graduation clinked softly as she shook her head, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion. 24 hours of teaching 7th grade math, and her feet felt like lead weights. But it wasn't the physical exhaustion that threatened to break her. It was the silence. "Ms. Hale?" The nurse's voice cut through her thoughts. "Dr. Thorne will see you now." Monroe gathered her worn leather bag, the one she'd splurged on during better days, and followed the nurse down the corridor. Each step echoed against the linoleum floors, a countdown to another conversation she'd have to face alone, another reminder that she was carrying twice the joy and twice the terror. The examination room was colder than she expected, or maybe it was just her nerves. The paper crinkled beneath her as she settled onto the examination table, her fingers absently tracing the pattern of her stretch marks through her shirt. The anatomy scan, the big one, the appointment, where they'd tell her if both babies were healthy. If a gentle knock interrupted her spiral. The door opened, and Dr. Lucian Thorne stepped in, his presence filling the room without overwhelming it. He moved with a quiet grace that seemed at odds with his tall frame, his blue-gray eyes scanning her chart with focused attention. "Good evening, Miss Hale," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I see we're looking at twins today." He glanced up from the chart, and something in his expression shifted when he noticed her solitude. Monroe straightened her spine, summoning the strength her mama had taught her never to lose. That's right. Though they're taking turns using my bladder as a trampoline, so I'm pretty sure they're already here. The joke fell flat in the space between them, but Dr. Thorne's lips curved slightly. Humor in the face of discomfort. That's a valuable skill in pregnancy. He pulled up a rolling stool, maintaining a professional distance. I understand this is your first visit with us. Would you like to tell me what brought you to change providers? The question hung in the air like smoke. Monroe's fingers found her earrings again, twisting them as she searched for words that wouldn't crack. My previous doctor. She was recommended by my husband, ex-husband, soon-to-be ex-husband. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I needed a fresh start. Dr. Thorne's pen paused over her chart. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, and Monroe caught a glimpse of something familiar in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Fresh starts are valid medical decisions too, he said quietly, returning to his notes. Now let's meet these acrobats who've been keeping you up at night. As he prepared the ultrasound machine, Monroe noticed the way his hands moved, confident but gentle, like someone used to handling fragile things. The wedding ring was conspicuously absent from his left hand, but the pale band of skin where it once sat told its own story. The gel was cold against her skin, and Monroe sucked in a sharp breath. Doctor. Thorne murmured an apology, his focus entirely on the screen as he moved the wand across her belly. The room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, 2 distinct heartbeats, strong and steady. There they are, he said softly, and for the first time, his smile reached his eyes. Baby A is right here. He pointed to the screen where a tiny hand seemed to wave. And baby B, the wand shifted slightly, is doing somersaults. Monroe's vision blurred as she watched her children dance on the screen. Her children. Not Graham's abandonment, not her failure, but her children. They're okay, she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Dr. Thorne turned to face her fully, his expression softening. They're more than okay, Miss Hale. They're perfect. The tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. Doctor. Thorne quietly handed her a tissue, pretending to study the monitor while she collected herself. In that moment of shared silence, something shifted, like a key turning in a lock neither of them knew existed. Thank you, Monroe managed, dabbing at her eyes. I haven't had much perfect lately. Perfect is overrated, Dr. Thorne replied, his voice carrying a weight that suggested personal experience. But strong, he gestured to the screen where both babies continued their underwater ballet. That runs in the family. As Monroe left the hospital that evening, the sun had already set, but something else had risen, a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a newborn's grip, but just as persistent. She didn't notice Dr. Thorne watching her from his office window, or the way his hand moved unconsciously to his own chest, where beneath his pristine white coat, another heart was beginning to remember how to beat. The waiting room remained empty, but the silence had changed. Sometimes that's where healing begins. The morning sickness hadn't gotten the memo about mornings. Monroe leaned against the cool tile wall of the hospital bathroom, her work blazer draped over the sink, wondering if her students' pre-algebra test papers would survive being graded through a haze of nausea. 23 weeks pregnant, and her body still hadn't decided if it was growing babies or staging a revolution. "Ms. Harrison," she called out weakly to her classroom aide, who was hovering anxiously outside the door. "Could you please watch my class for 10 more minutes?" The teenagers' voices echoed down the hallway from her classroom, room 204, Baltimore East Middle School, where they were supposed to be solving equations, not plotting their escape. "Of course, Ms. Hale. Should I call someone?" "No, I'm fine. Just..." Another wave hit, and Monroe closed her eyes, breathing through it. The twins were particularly active today, as if competing for Olympic medals in synchronized swimming or boxing. The bathroom door creaked open, and Monroe tensed, preparing her teacher voice to send any curious student back to class. But instead of teenage sneakers, she saw sensible brown leather shoes and the hem of dark blue scrubs. "Miss Hale?" That voice. Monroe's eyes snapped open to find Dr. Lucian Thorne standing in the doorway, concern etched across his features. Of all the bathrooms in all of Baltimore, she had to be throwing up in the one next to where he was giving a community health lecture. "This isn't what it looks like," Monroe managed, attempting to straighten up. Her carefully twisted hair was coming undone, small coils framing her face. I mean, it is exactly what it looks like, but I'm fine. Fascinating definition of fine you have there. His voice was gentle, but his eyes were scanning her professionally. May I? He gestured to her wrist, and Monroe nodded, too exhausted to maintain her usual walls. His fingers were cool against her pulse point, and for a moment, the only sound was the tick of his watch. Your heart rate's elevated. When was the last time you ate? Monroe's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar. At her raised eyebrow, he actually looked slightly embarrassed. I keep them for my long shifts. It's not exactly a gourmet meal, but better than nothing. Monroe accepted the bar, their fingers brushing briefly. Thank you. Though I hope you don't make a habit of following sick women into bathrooms. Something that might have been a smile tugged at his lips. Only the ones who are carrying twins and skipping meals. He paused, then added more softly, I was here giving a lecture on prenatal nutrition to senior students. Ironic, isn't it? Monroe unwrapped the bar, taking a small bite. Let me guess. How to take care of yourself while growing humans 101. More like basic nutrition for future healthcare providers, he corrected, leaning against the doorframe, though your title has a better ring to it. The protein bar was helping, settling her stomach enough that she could stand properly. Well, Dr. Thorne, as a teacher, I'd say your timing is impeccable. Though your choice of classroom is questionable. This time he did smile, brief but genuine. Sometimes the most important lessons happen outside the classroom. He hesitated, then added, Speaking of which, I noticed you missed your follow-up appointment last week. Monroe busied herself with smoothing her shirt over her bump. Things have been complicated. The school board cut our planning periods, and with Graham's lawyer sending papers every other day. Graham? Dr. Thorne's voice remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture. My ex, soon-to-be ex. Monroe's fingers found her earrings again, a tell she couldn't seem to break. He's decided he wants to be involved after all, just not with me. Understanding darkened Dr. Thorne's eyes. Entire custody. He says he wants to ensure proper care and upbringing. His words, not mine. Monroe's laugh was hollow. Funny how he remembers proper care now, after leaving me to handle 28 morning sickness episodes alone. Yes, I counted. Dr. Thorne was quiet for a moment, his hands in his pockets. 28 sounds like 28 too many to face alone. He pulled out a business card, hesitated, then turned it over and wrote something on the back. This is my direct line, for medical emergencies. Monroe took the card, noting the neat, precise handwriting. Is morning sickness in the faculty bathroom considered an emergency? It is when it's accompanied by skipped meals and missed appointments. His tone was professional again, but his eyes held something warmer. The twins need you strong, Ms. Hale, and strength sometimes means accepting help. The bell rang, startling them both. Monroe could hear her students shuffling, gathering their things. I should go teach the future of America. Probably. He stepped back, giving her space. But first, finish that protein bar. Doctor's orders. Monroe slipped the card into her blazer pocket, next to her heart. Thank you, Dr. Thorne, for the bar and the emergency line. Lucian, he said quietly, almost to himself. Yes, my name is Lucian. Before Monroe could respond, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Through the open door, she could hear him explaining something to Miss Harrison, probably assuring her that everything was fine. Monroe looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting her twist back into place. Her reflection showed the same face as always, brown eyes tired but determined, skin glowing with what her mother insisted was the famous pregnancy radiance, but felt more like perpetual overheating. But something was different. Maybe it was the protein bar settling in her stomach, or maybe it was the weight of the business card in her pocket, but she felt steadier. The second bell rang. Her students would be waiting. Monroe straightened her shoulders, channeling her mother's strength and her father's determination. One hand moved to her belly, where the twins had finally settled into a gentler dance. All right, little ones, she whispered. Let's go teach some algebra. And maybe, she touched the pocket with the card. And maybe we're not as alone as we thought. Outside, the autumn sun painted Baltimore in shades of gold and promise, while inside room 204, life continued its messy, beautiful dance. And in a hospital across town, a certain doctor found himself staring at his phone, wondering if helping a patient find her strength might help him remember his own. Numbers had always made sense to Monroe. 7 times 8 would always be 56. The square root of 100 would always be 10. But sitting in her obstetrician's office on a grey Tuesday afternoon, staring at the stack of legal documents in her lap, no equation could help her make sense of Graham's demands. Full custody. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. He wants full custody of babies he hasn't even met. Her fingers crumpled the edge of the papers, where Graham's lawyer had helpfully highlighted the important parts in neon yellow. As if the word unfit needed any more emphasis, the twins shifted restlessly, responding to her agitation. 26 weeks now, and they seemed to dance to her emotions like leaves in the wind. Monroe forced herself to breathe deeply, the way her mother had taught her during piano lessons. In through the nose, out through the mouth, count to 4, find your center. A knock at the door broke her concentration. Dr. Thorne, Lucian, she reminded herself, though she hadn't used his first name aloud yet, entered with his usual quiet grace. But today, something was different. The shadows under his eyes were deeper, his normally pristine white coat slightly rumpled at the edges. "Miss Hale," he started, then paused, noticing the papers in her lap. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "I see you've received them too." Monroe's head snapped up. "Toys too." Lucian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd never seen him make before. It made him look younger, more vulnerable. "I've been served with a subpoena. Your ex-husband's lawyer wants my testimony about your prenatal care." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Monroe gripped the armrests of her chair, her gold earrings catching the fluorescent light as she shook her head. That's impossible. Doctor-patient confidentiality can be challenged in custody cases." Lucian's voice was gentle but firm. "But Miss Hale, Monroe, I need you to know something." He pulled up his stool, sitting at eye level with her. "Everything in your file shows exemplary prenatal care. You've followed every recommendation, made every important appointment, maintained your health despite significant stress. If they want my professional opinion, they'll get it." Monroe studied his face, searching for any hint of pity. She found none. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know." He reached for her chart, but his hand hesitated over it. "And because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same courtroom, the same type of lawyers who highlight words like weapons." Understanding dawned. "Your divorce?" Lucian nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. 3 years ago, my son, James. I only see him every other weekend now. His mother's lawyer painted a very convincing picture of a doctor too busy for fatherhood. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Monroe wanted to reach out, to offer some comfort, but her own hands were shaking too much to be steady. "I'm sorry," she said finally, meaning it. No one should have to fight for the right to love their own children. Something flickered in Lucian's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or remembered grief. No, they shouldn't. He straightened, professionalism settling back over him like armor. "Now, let's check on these little ones." The exam proceeded as usual, but the silence between them had changed. It was fuller now, laden with shared understanding. The twins' heartbeats filled the room, strong, steady, defiant against the world's chaos. "They're growing perfectly," Lucian noted, his voice warming as he pointed to the screen. "Baby A is sucking their thumb, and baby B appears to be doing the Macarena." Monroe laughed despite herself, watching her children dance on the grainy screen. "They get that from me. I used to teach dance classes in college." "Used to." Life happened. Bills, responsibilities. She trailed off, remembering weekend workshops and the joy of movement. Graham said it wasn't practical. Lucian's hand stilled on the ultrasound wand. "And what do you say?" The question caught her off guard. What did she say? When was the last time anyone had asked? "I say." Monroe watched her babies move, strong and free in their private ocean. "I say maybe it's time to remember who I was before anyone told me who to be." Lucian nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Now that sounds like the mother these twins deserve. After the appointment, Monroe found herself lingering in the hospital parking lot, watching the sunset paint Baltimore's skyline in shades of purple and gold. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Graham's lawyer, no doubt, but for once, she didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, she pulled up her music app and scrolled to an old playlist labeled Dance Studio Days. The first notes of a forgotten melody filled her car, and her body remembered the rhythm, the freedom, the joy. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of movement. Dr. Thorne was leaving for the day, his tall frame silhouetted against the hospital lights. He paused at his car, phone pressed to his ear, and even from a distance, Monroe could read the tension in his shoulders. A custody call, maybe, or just another battle in the war they both seemed to be fighting. The twins kicked in perfect synchronization, as if applauding. Monroe placed both hands on her belly, feeling their strength, their possibility. "Okay, little ones," she whispered. "Lesson number 1. Sometimes the bravest dance is the one you do alone." She paused, watching as Lucian's car pulled away. "But maybe sometimes the best dances are the ones where someone unexpected joins in." The music played on, filling her car with memories of who she used to be and whispers of who she might become. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers, more highlighted documents, more battles. But tonight, in a hospital parking lot as day faded to dusk, Monroe Hale remembered how to dance. The grocery store at 11 p.m. was its own kind of liminal space. Monroe wandered the aisles of Martinez Market, her shopping basket heavy with the random cravings that had driven her out of bed: pickles, chocolate ice cream, and, inexplicably, raw carrots. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting strange shadows in the nearly empty store. 28 weeks pregnant, and sleep had become a distant memory. Between the twins' nocturnal gymnastics and the mounting pressure of Graham's custody suit, Monroe's nights had become an endless parade of worry and watermelon cravings. Her loose Baltimore Ravens sleep shirt stretched over her growing belly as she reached for a jar of peanut butter on the top shelf. "Let me help you with that." A familiar hand reached past her, easily grabbing the jar. Monroe turned to find Lucian Thorne standing there, looking decidedly undoctor-like in faded jeans and a grey Henley. The shadows under his eyes matched her own. "We have to stop meeting like this," Monroe said, accepting the peanut butter. "People will talk. At this hour, the only people awake are the sleep-deprived and the guilty." He glanced at her basket. "Although that combination suggests a bit of both." Monroe looked down at her mismatched groceries and laughed. "Judge not, Dr. Thorne. Your cart isn't exactly a model of nutritional excellence either." She nodded toward his basket, which contained coffee, more coffee, and a single sad-looking TV dinner. "Touché." His smile was tired but genuine. "Long shift, long day. The twins have decided sleep is for the weak." She shifted her weight, trying to find a comfortable position. "You? Emergency C-section at 8, then paperwork, then more paperwork." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell for stress. "Then James's mother called to change this weekend's custody schedule. Again." The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange patterns on the linoleum floor. Somewhere in the store, an old song played softly, something about midnight and chance meetings. "How old is he?" Monroe asked quietly. "James?" 7. Lucian's voice softened. "He likes dinosaurs and hates Brussels sprouts. He has my eyes, but his mother's laugh." He paused, looking down at his coffee-filled cart. "At least, I think he still hates Brussels sprouts. So it's hard to keep up with preferences when you're working from a calendar." Monroe touched her belly, feeling the twins shift. "I'm afraid of missing things," she admitted. "If Graham wins, there will be so many moments I'll never get back." "Monroe," Lucian's voice was firm but gentle. "May I show you something?" She nodded, curious. He pulled out his phone, quickly finding what he wanted, then held it out to her. The screen showed a carefully organized spreadsheet. "What am I looking at? Every moment I've had with James for the past 3 years, every park visit, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. Not because I'm obsessive, but because—" He took a deep breath. "Because when you only get pieces of your child's life, you learn to make each piece count." Monroe studied the spreadsheet, noting the detailed entries. October 12th. James lost tooth during dinosaur documentary. Kept tooth under pillow despite Mom's house being next day. Wanted Dad's tooth fairy to have a turn. He got $2 from me, 3 from his mum's tooth fairy. Lucian's smile held equal parts joy and pain. "We're still competing on that front." The overhead lights hummed, a quiet soundtrack to their midnight confession. Monroe handed back the phone, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Oh, thank you," she said softly, "for showing me that. Thank you for understanding it." He glanced at her basket again. "Though I feel obligated as your doctor to point out that ice cream and pickles isn't exactly a balanced midnight meal." Says the man buying enough coffee to fuel a small army. "Fair point." He hesitated, then gestured toward the store's small deli section. "They make decent sandwiches here. If you're interested in actual food—" Monroe should have said no, should have remembered professional boundaries and complicated situations, but exhaustion had worn down her usual defenses, and the twins were doing something that felt suspiciously like encouraging kicks. "Only if you're willing to trade some of that coffee for my chocolate ice cream," she found herself saying. They ended up at one of the store's small tables, sharing turkey sandwiches and trading stories in the quiet hours between yesterday and tomorrow. Monroe told him about her students' latest mathematical adventures, and he shared tales from his residency days. The fluorescent light still hummed, but somehow it felt more like starlight. "Can I ask you something?" Monroe said, watching him doctor his coffee with an alarming amount of sugar. "That spreadsheet, does it help, making order out of chaos?" Lucien was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "It helps me remember that even broken things can be beautiful. A scattered constellation is still made of stars." The twins kicked in tandem, as if applauding his poetry. Monroe pressed a hand to her side, and without thinking, reached for Lucien's hand. "Here," she said, placing his palm where the strongest kicks were. "They seem to like your voice." The moment stretched between them, delicate as spun sugar. Lucien's hand was warm against her belly, and his eyes held a mix of wonder and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. "Strong," he murmured, "like their mother." The store's ancient sound system crackled, switching songs. Patsy Cline's voice filled the empty aisles, singing about falling to pieces. Monroe slowly withdrew her hand, and Lucien straightened, both of them remembering who and where they were. "I should get home," Monroe said, gathering her strange assortment of groceries. "Early class tomorrow. And I have prenatal appointments at 8. Lucien stood, collecting his coffee arsenal. "Try to get some rest, Ms. Hale." "Monroe," she corrected softly. "After midnight pickle runs. I think we're on a first-name basis." His smile reached his eyes this time. "Monroe," he agreed. "Sleep well." They parted ways in the parking lot, each carrying their midnight provisions and unspoken words. Monroe watched his car disappear into the Baltimore night, then turned her face up to the stars, scattered but somehow perfect in their chaos. The twins moved again, gentler now, like they were settling in for sleep. "I know, little ones," she whispered. "I know. Sometimes the best conversations happen in the strangest places." As she drove home, the night wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of Graham's legal threats felt a little lighter. Sometimes strength came in spreadsheets and shared sandwiches. Sometimes healing happened in fluorescent-lit spaces between yesterday and tomorrow. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe conspired to put two broken people in the same grocery store at exactly the right moment. The courthouse steps were slick with November rain. Monroe gripped the metal railing, her 30-week pregnant body protesting each careful step. The preliminary custody hearing loomed ahead like a storm cloud, and her sensible black flats felt anything but steady on the wet stone. "Careful," a familiar voice came from behind her, followed by the sensation of a strong hand at her elbow. "These steps are a lawsuit waiting to happen." Monroe didn't need to turn to know it was Lucien. His presence had become something her body recognized, like the way the twins always seemed to settle when he was near. "My hero," she said dryly, but accepted his support. "Though I'm pretty sure this violates about 12 different doctor-patient boundaries. I'm here as an expert witness, not your doctor." His voice was professional, but his hand remained steady at her elbow. "Besides, preventing a fall on courthouse steps falls under the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm." They reached the top of the steps, and Monroe turned to thank him, only to freeze at the sight of a familiar figure approaching through the rain. Graham Calloway stood under a sleek black umbrella, his tailored suit as immaculate as ever. He looked exactly as he had the day he'd left, polished, controlled, and completely untouchable. The only difference was the blonde woman beside him, clutching his arm and wearing an engagement ring that Monroe recognized from their joint bank account statements. "Monroe!" Graham's voice carried across the wet courtyard, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as bitter. "You're looking healthy." Lucien's hand tightened slightly on her elbow before dropping away. Monroe straightened her spine, grateful for the simple black maternity dress her mother had helped her choose. "Graham, I see you've been busy." The blonde, Veronica something, if Monroe remembered the social media posts correctly, had the grace to look uncomfortable. Graham merely smiled, the same smile he'd used when convincing Monroe to give up her dance classes. "So that's just ensuring our children have the best possible future. I trust you received the updated custody proposal." You mean your demand for full custody with supervised visitation for me? Monroe's gold earrings caught the grey light as she tilted her chin up. Yes, my lawyer found it fascinating reading. It's for the best, Monroe. You know that. Graham's eyes flickered to Lucian, who stood silently beside her. And who might this be? Dr. Lucian Thorne. Lucian's voice was cool and professional. I'm here as an expert witness regarding Ms. Hale's prenatal care. Something sharp flashed in Graham's eyes. Ah, yes, the devoted physician. Your reputation precedes you, Doctor, especially regarding personal involvement with patients. Monroe felt Lucian stiffen beside her. Before either man could speak, the courthouse doors opened, and her lawyer appeared. Miss Hale, they're ready for us. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of legal terminology and thinly veiled accusations. Graham's lawyer painted a picture of an unstable single mother, while Monroe's attorney presented medical records showing exemplary prenatal care and letters from her school principal, praising her dedication. Through it all, Monroe kept her hands folded over her belly, feeling the twins move restlessly. She didn't look at Graham, didn't acknowledge his occasional sighs or whispered comments to Veronica. Instead, she focused on breathing, on staying strong for her children. When Lucian took the stand, his testimony was precise and professional. Yes, Ms. Hale had followed every medical recommendation. Yes, her pregnancy was progressing beautifully despite significant stress. No, he had no concerns about her ability to care for twins. And would you say your relationship with Ms. Hale is strictly professional? Graham's lawyer asked, her smile sharp as a scalpel. Lucian met Monroe's eyes briefly before answering. I provide Ms. Hale with medical care of the highest standard. My primary concern is the health of her and her unborn children. That's not what I asked, Doctor. Objection? Monroe's lawyer called. Relevance? The judge sustained the objection, but the damage was done. Monroe could feel Graham's satisfied smirk without looking at him. After the hearing, Monroe found herself in the courthouse bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The judge had scheduled another hearing for next month, closer to her due date. More time, more stress, more fights over children who weren't even born yet. The door opened, and Monroe tensed, expecting Veronica or one of Graham's lawyers. Instead, she saw Lucian's reflection in the mirror. This is the women's bathroom, she said, attempting a smile. I know, I'm adding it to my list of professional boundaries crossed today. He held out a paper cup of water. You should stay hydrated. Monroe accepted the water, their fingers brushing. Thank you for everything today. Your testimony was the truth. He leaned against the sink, his usual composure cracking slightly, though I wanted to say more. About how you sing to the twins during examinations, how you've memorized every developmental milestone, how you're already more of a parent than... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Than Graham will ever be, Monroe finished softly. It's okay. You can say it. It wouldn't have helped. Trust me, I learned that lesson in my own custody battle. He checked his watch. I have to get back to the hospital. Will you be okay? Monroe studied her reflection. Tired eyes but steady gaze. Her mother's strength in her shoulders. Her father's determination in her jaw. I will be. The twins have a dance recital scheduled for this afternoon. Very exclusive performance, audience of one. Lucian's smile was small but warm. Let me guess. Interpretive dance to express their feelings about legal proceedings. More like the Macarena on my bladder. She touched her belly, feeling them move. But hey, at least they've got rhythm. Like their mother. The words were quiet, almost lost in the hum of the bathroom fan. Monroe met his eyes in the mirror. Lucian, I know. He straightened, doctor mode settling back over him like a familiar coat. Professional boundaries. Right. The word tasted like copper in her mouth. Professional boundaries. He left first, the door closing softly behind him. Monroe stayed a moment longer, watching the fluorescent lights flicker above her. The twins kicked in perfect synchronization, as if trying to tell her something important. I know, little ones, she whispered. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to keep are the ones we're not sure we want. Outside, the November rain continued to fall on Baltimore, washing away footprints and almost moments, while inside the courthouse bathroom, Monroe Hale added another crack to her carefully constructed walls, right next to the one shaped like a doctor's gentle hands and understanding eyes. December arrived in Baltimore like a whisper, bringing soft snow and longer nights. Monroe sat in her classroom after hours, 32 weeks pregnant and surrounded by half-graded math tests, When the first contraction hit, not labor, she knew that much from her endless research, but Braxton Hicks, her body's way of practicing for the main event. Still, it was enough to make her pause, one hand pressed against her side, while the other clutched a red pen suspended over Jenny Martinez's creative interpretation of fractions. Through the classroom windows, she could see snow beginning to fall, turning the school parking lot into a blank canvas. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Graham's lawyer. They'd been relentless since the courthouse hearing, picking apart every aspect of her life, her bank statements, her work schedule, even her grocery receipts. The latest demanded a detailed childcare plan for when she returned to teaching. The twins shifted restlessly, perhaps sensing her tension. Monroe set down her pen and began to hum softly. An old lullaby her mother used to sing, something about starlight and promises. Slowly, they settled, just as the classroom door opened. "Miss Harrison said I'd find you here." Monroe looked up to find Lucian standing in the doorway, still in his hospital scrubs with snowflakes melting in his hair. They hadn't spoken since the courthouse, their last appointment handled by his colleague, Dr. Chen. Professional boundaries. They'd both agreed, yet here he was, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly right among the student artwork and math posters. "Parent-teacher conferences," he asked, stepping inside. "Test grading." Monroe gestured to the papers scattered across her desk. "Apparently, the quadratic formula is open to creative interpretation." "Ah, yes. I remember trying to convince my algebra teacher that x2 could identify as x3 if it believed in itself." He moved closer, concern flickering across his features. "You okay? You seem like I'm having Braxton Hicks contractions while trying to decode teenage mathematical philosophy." She attempted a smile. "Oh, just another Tuesday in the life of a pregnant math teacher." Lucian pulled up one of the student chairs, looking almost comical with his long legs folded into the small space. "You should be resting," says the man who just worked a 12-hour shift. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't think I haven't noticed the schedule changes. You've been avoiding me." "Professional boundaries." "I know." Monroe winced as another practice contraction tightened across her belly. "Though I'm not sure professional boundaries include tracking down your patient at her workplace." Lucian was quiet for a moment, watching the snow fall outside. James had his winter concert tonight, piano recital. His voice was soft, almost lost in the hum of the classroom heater. "I was supposed to be there. Caroline, his mother, changed the schedule last minute." Again, understanding dawned. "So you came here instead." "I came here because sitting alone in my office thinking about another missed moment felt like drowning." He met her eyes. "And because every time I close my eyes, I see you on those courthouse steps, facing down the man who tried to break you, and I—" "And you what?" Monroe's heart was beating faster than any Braxton Hicks could explain. "And I realized that all these professional boundaries we're so carefully maintaining." He ran a hand through his snow-damp hair. "They're not protecting anyone. They're just keeping us both alone." The classroom felt suddenly too small, too warm. Monroe pushed back from her desk, needing space to think. "Lucian, we can't. Graham's lawyers are already implying—" "I know." He stood too, careful to maintain distance. "Trust me, I know exactly how this looks. The doctor falling for his patient. The divorced dad getting too close to a custody case that mirrors his own. Every ethical line blurred beyond recognition. Falling for." The words hung in the air between them, delicate as the snowflakes outside. Before he could answer, Monroe's phone buzzed again. Graham's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. "Amended custody proposal. You might want to sit down for this one." The twins kicked hard, picking up on her sudden spike of anxiety. Lucian noticed her expression change and was beside her in an instant, professional mask back in place. "What's wrong?" "Graham." She showed him the text. He's going to use this. Use us. Whatever this is. Let him try." Lucian's voice was quiet, but fierce. "Some things are worth fighting for." "My babies," Monroe whispered. "Yes." He hesitated, then added softly, "and maybe something else too." The snow fell faster outside, turning Baltimore into a snow globe of possibilities and fears. Monroe's hand found her earrings, her mother's strength, her father's courage. The twins moved again, gentler now, like they were trying to tell her something important. "I can't lose them," she said finally. "I won't." "You won't." Lucian took a step back, respecting her unspoken decision. "But Monroe, you won't lose yourself either. Not this time." She looked at him then, really looked, at the tired lines around his eyes, the compassion in his gaze, the way he stood like a man used to weathering storms alone. "What about you? What will you lose?" "Nothing I haven't lost before." His smile was sad but genuine. "Except maybe the chance to tell you that watching you fight for your children, for yourself, it's made me remember what courage looks like." The classroom clock ticked steadily, counting down moments they couldn't afford to have. Outside, the world was turning white, covering Baltimore in a blanket of new beginnings and missed chances. "I should go," Lucian said finally. "Early surgeries tomorrow." Monroe nodded, not trusting her voice. He paused at the door, snow swirling in behind him. "For what it's worth," he added quietly, "some boundaries aren't meant to protect us. They're meant to test how much we're willing to risk for what matters." After he left, Monroe stood at the window, watching his figure disappear into the snowy night. The twins danced their own private ballet, perhaps protesting the sudden absence of his voice, or perhaps reminding her that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were just the heart recognizing its own rhythm in another's silence. She turned back to her desk, to the pile of tests waiting to be graded. Jenny Martinez's creative fractions stared up at her, and suddenly Monroe understood what the girl had been trying to say. Sometimes the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. Sometimes the equation didn't need solving. It just needed courage to be written. The snow continued to fall, erasing footprints and boundaries alike, while inside room 204, Monroe Hale added another equation to life's complicated mathematics: how to measure the distance between what we want and what we dare to reach for. The emergency room lights were too bright, too harsh, making everything feel surreal. Monroe lay on her side in the hospital bed, 34 weeks pregnant and trying not to panic, as monitors beeped steadily around her. Outside her room, Baltimore Memorial Hospital hummed with its usual midnight energy, but inside, time seemed suspended. It had started during fifth period, a sharp pain different from her usual Braxton Hicks, followed by spotting that sent Miss Harrison running for the school nurse. Now, hours later, Monroe watched the fetal monitor's steady rhythms, each beep a reminder that the twins were okay, for now. "Preterm labor," Dr. Chen had said, her kind face serious. "We need to stop it. I've paged Dr. Thorne. He knows your case best." Monroe hadn't argued, couldn't argue, not when her baby's safety was at stake, not when every instinct screamed for the one person who could make this less terrifying. The door opened quietly, and Lucian stepped in. He looked like he'd been running, tie askew, hair mussed, eyes intense with concern. 2 weeks had passed since their conversation in her classroom, 2 weeks of careful distance and professional courtesy. But now, "I came as soon as I got the page." He moved to check her monitors, his doctor's mask firmly in place, but his hands trembled slightly as he reviewed her chart. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." Monroe tried to smile, but it felt wobbly. "Though your twins are apparently as dramatic as their mother." "Our twins tend to have excellent timing." The words slipped out before he could catch them, an echo of their easy banter from better days. He cleared his throat. "The medication seems to be working. Contractions are spacing out." Monroe nodded, then winced as another pain wrapped around her middle. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He took it immediately, professional boundaries forgotten. "Breathe through it," he murmured. "That's it. Just like that." When the contraction passed, neither of them let go. The monitors beeped steadily in the background, counting heartbeats and moments and things left unsaid. "I was so scared," Monroe whispered finally. "All I could think was, Graham doesn't even know their names, the ones I picked. He's fighting so hard for them, and he doesn't even know I want to name them after the stars." Lucian's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Tell me." Celeste and Nova. Her free hand rested on her belly, feeling their movements. "Because they're the light in my darkness." Is that too cheesy? "It's perfect." His voice was soft, but his eyes held something fierce. "They're perfect." The moment stretched between them, delicate as spider silk. Then Monroe's phone buzzed on the bedside table. Graham's lawyer, again. Reality crashed back in. "I should—" Lucian started to pull away, but Monroe held on. "Stay," she said. "Please. Not as my doctor. Just stay." He sank into the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. "Monroe, if anyone finds out—" "I know." She met his eyes. "But I'm tired of being afraid. Of Graham. Of lawyers. Of losing everything. I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for you is just what? Just gratitude. Or hormones. or two lonely people recognizing their own pain in each other. She took a shaky breath. Because it's more than that, isn't it? Lucian was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow fall outside her window. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. The first time I saw you in that waiting room, something in me recognized something in you. Not just the loneliness or the battle scars, but the strength, the light. He squeezed her hand. I've been fighting it ever since. Why? Because I'm terrified of failing another family, of not being enough. Again, the confession hung in the air between them. James, I missed so much. First steps, first words. Now I get photos of moments I should have been there for. Lucian. Monroe tugged his hand until he looked at her. You're not failing anyone. You're fighting like me. The twins kicked then, strong and sure, making the monitors jump. Lucian laughed softly, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. Celeste and Nova seemed to agree. They're smart girls. Monroe smiled, then sobered. Graham's lawyers will use this against me. Say I'm unstable, making poor choices. Let them try. Lucian's jaw set in a determined line. Some choices aren't poor, they're just brave. A nurse appeared in the doorway, then hesitated, seeing their joined hands. Lucian didn't let go. Instead, he stood, using his body to shield their connection from view. Try to rest, he said softly. I'll be here. Not as your doctor. Just here. Monroe nodded, suddenly exhausted. The medication was making her drowsy, but she fought to keep her eyes open. Lucian? When this is over, when the twins are born and the custody battle is done, will you teach me to dance again? His smile was like sunrise after a storm. I thought you were the dance teacher. Maybe. She felt herself drifting, anchored only by his hand in hers. But I think some dances are better learned together. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was his whispered reply. Then we'll learn together, step by step, beat by beat, until we get it right. Through the hospital window, Baltimore glittered with winter lights, while inside room 412, two hearts found their rhythm in the space between professional and personal, between fear and courage, between what was safe and what was true. And in Monroe's dreams, she danced, not alone, not anymore, while two stars named Celeste and Nova twirled above, lighting the way home. The conference room at Monroe's lawyer's office felt too small for the storm that was brewing. At 36 weeks pregnant, Monroe sat with her back straight despite her exhaustion, one hand resting protectively over Celeste and Nova, while the other gripped a manila envelope that had arrived that morning. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Monroe leaving the hospital after her preterm labor scare, Lucian walking her to her car, their hands clasped in the emergency room. Each image time-stamped, documented, weaponized. Mrs. Calloway, Graham's lawyer began. Ms. Hale, Monroe corrected firmly, her gold earrings catching the winter sunlight. I never changed my name. Miss Hale, the lawyer continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. These photos raise serious concerns about your judgment. Engaging in a romantic relationship with your physician while pregnant with my client's children. Objection. Monroe's lawyer interrupted. This isn't a courtroom, counselor, and there's no evidence of any improper relationship. Graham leaned forward, his expensive suit crinkling slightly. No evidence. She's holding his hand in half these photos. The same doctor who's supposed to be providing expert testimony about her fitness as a mother. Monroe felt the twins shift restlessly, responding to her tension. She thought of Lucian, probably in surgery now, unaware that their careful dance had been captured and twisted into something ugly. She thought of his gentle hands, his quiet strength, the way he'd stayed with her that night in the hospital. Professional boundaries finally crumbling under the weight of something stronger. Let me be clear, Graham continued, his voice smooth as poison. Either Dr. Thorne withdraws as a witness and removes himself from your care immediately, or these photos will be presented at next week's custody hearing, along with documentation of every time he's visited your classroom, every late-night meeting at Martinez Market, every... You had me followed? Monroe's voice was quiet but steady. For how long? Long enough. Graham's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm protecting our children, Monroe, from poor choices, from instability, from a mother who clearly can't... Can't what? Monroe stood slowly, her hand still cradling her belly. Can't be trusted to know my own heart. Can't be trusted to recognize real care, real support. After years of your controlled version of love, she looked directly at Graham. You don't want custody because you love these girls. You want custody because you can't stand that I might find happiness without you." The room fell silent. Even Graham's lawyer stopped shuffling papers. "You have 24 hours to decide," Graham said finally. "Dr. Thorne's withdrawal, or these photos go to the judge. Choose wisely." After they left, Monroe's lawyer touched her arm gently. "We can fight this. Character assassination isn't—" "I need a minute," Monroe whispered. "Please." Alone in the conference room, Monroe watched Baltimore's winter sky darken with approaching snow. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she typed out a message to Lucian. "We need to talk. Graham has photos." His response came quickly. "My office." 30 minutes. The hospital corridors felt longer than usual as Monroe made her way to Lucian's office. A few nurses gave her knowing looks. Apparently, hospital gossip traveled faster than Graham's private investigators. Lucian was waiting, his surgical scrubs replaced by his usual dress shirt and tie. He took one look at her face and closed the door. "Show me," he said quietly. Monroe handed him the envelope, watched as he flipped through the photos, his expression growing darker with each image. "He wants you to withdraw as a witness," she said. "Cut all contact, or he'll use these to paint me as unstable in court." Lucian set the photos down carefully. "And what do you want?" "What I want," Monroe laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "I want to have my babies without fear. I want to teach my students without looking over my shoulder. I want—" She touched her belly as the twins kicked. "I want to dance again without someone telling me the music's wrong." "Monroe!" Lucian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. "Tell me what to do. If you want me to withdraw, to step away." "No." The word came out fierce and certain. "No more stepping away. No more hiding." She met his gaze. "I spent years letting Graham decide what was best for me. Never again. The custody hearing will show exactly what these photos show." Monroe squared her shoulders. "A woman who's learned to recognize real love, a mother who's choosing courage over fear, and a man who's brave enough to stay even when it's hard." Lucian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "Are you sure? Once we take this stand?" "I'm sure." Monroe squeezed his hand. "Celeste and Nova deserve to see their mother fight for joy, for truth, for the kind of love that builds up instead of tearing down." Outside, snow began to fall, thick and fast, turning Baltimore into a world of white possibility. The twins moved in perfect synchronization, as if dancing to music only they could hear. "Then we fight," Lucian said softly. Together, Monroe echoed, and in that word was every dance not danced, every moment not seized, every fear finally faced. The photos lay scattered on Lucian's desk, each one a testament to something Graham had never understood. That real love didn't need to hide. That real strength sometimes looked like holding hands in emergency rooms. That real parenting meant showing your children how to be brave. Monroe touched the nearest photo, where Lucian's hand supported her elbow on the courthouse steps. "Look at us," she whispered. "All this time trying to maintain boundaries, and anyone with eyes could see." "See what?" "That some loves are worth the risk." She smiled up at him, fierce and certain. "That some dances can't be choreographed or controlled. They just have to be lived." Lucian's free hand came to rest beside hers on her belly, feeling Celeste and Nova's strong kicks. "Then let's live it. All of it. The hard parts, and the beautiful ones. Even if we stumble." His smile held all the warmth Graham's had lacked, especially then. "Because that's when we'll hold on tighter." The snow fell harder, erasing the world outside his office window, while inside, two hearts beat in time with two others, creating a rhythm that no court could judge, no lawyer could twist, no fear could silence. And somewhere in the universe, two stars named Celeste and Nova twinkled a little brighter, blessing the dance that was just beginning. The courtroom clock ticked like a metronome, counting down the moments until everything changed. At 38 weeks pregnant, Monroe sat at the defendant's table, her dark blue maternity dress carefully chosen to project stability, strength, motherhood. The twins moved restlessly, perhaps sensing the tension that filled courtroom 3B of the Baltimore County Circuit Court. Graham sat with his legal team, Veronica notably absent. He'd traded his usual power suit for something more subdued. Navy blue, conservative, the costume of a concerned father. The private investigator's photos were arranged neatly in a folder before him, each one a potential weapon. "Your Honor," Graham's lawyer began, "we'd like to call Dr. Lucian Thorne to the stand." Monroe felt rather than saw Lucian rise from his seat in the gallery, He moved with quiet dignity to the witness stand, his shoulders straight despite the weight of what was coming. He'd refused to withdraw his testimony, refused to step away. Sometimes, he'd told her last night over late-night coffee at Martinez Market, the right path is the hardest one. Dr. Thorne, Graham's lawyer, smiled like a shark scenting blood. How long have you been Mrs. Hale's physician? Since her 20th week of pregnancy, Lucian answered calmly. And when she transferred her care to Baltimore Memorial, and in that time, would you say you've developed personal feelings for your patient? Monroe's lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance goes to the witness's credibility, Graham's lawyer countered, and to Ms. Hale's judgment regarding the welfare of the children. The judge considered, then nodded. I'll allow it. The witness will answer. Lucian met Monroe's eyes briefly before speaking. My feelings for Miss Hale are not relevant to my medical testimony. What is relevant is her exemplary prenatal care, her quick response to complications, and her unwavering dedication to her daughter's health. So you deny these photos? Graham's lawyer held up the first image. Monroe and Lucian in the emergency room, hands clasped. Deny that you've crossed professional boundaries. I deny nothing. Lucian's voice was steady. I chose to support a patient through a medical crisis, to be present for someone facing challenges I understand personally. If that makes me less credible in your eyes, so be it. But it makes me more human in my own. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Monroe touched her belly as Celeste, or maybe Nova, kicked particularly hard. Her mother, sitting in the front row, reached forward to squeeze her shoulder. Doctor, Thornton, Graham's lawyer continued, are you aware that developing romantic feelings for a patient violates medical ethics? I'm aware that ethics are complex, Lucian answered, that sometimes doing the right thing means recognizing when rules and reality intersect. I'm also aware that I'm not the one who abandoned my children for a political career. Objection, Graham's lawyer snapped. Withdrawn, Lucian said calmly. But my point stands. We're here to discuss Mrs. Hale's fitness as a mother. I've witnessed that fitness firsthand, in her dedication to prenatal care, in her preparation for twins, in her ability to balance work and health. Any personal feelings I may have developed don't change those facts. The questioning continued, each answer more measured than the last. Monroe watched as Lucian handled every attempt to discredit him with grace and honesty. No denials, no excuses, just truth. Finally, Monroe's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Dr. Thorne, in your professional opinion, what environment would best serve these children? Lucian straightened, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. Children thrive where they are loved unconditionally, where they see strength modeled, not just talked about, where they learn that life's hardest moments can lead to its most beautiful ones. He looked directly at Graham. They need a parent who shows them how to be brave, how to be true to themselves, how to dance even when the music seems impossible to hear. The metaphor wasn't lost on Monroe. She thought of all their careful steps, their attempted boundaries, their growing recognition that some rhythms couldn't be denied. Her hands cradled her belly as the twins moved in their own private dance. No further questions, her lawyer said quietly. As Lucian stepped down from the witness stand, a sharp pain wrapped around Monroe's middle, different from Braxton Hicks, more intense. She must have made some small sound because both lawyers stopped, turning to look at her. Ms. Hale, the judge leaned forward. Are you all right? Another pain hit, and Monroe felt something warm and wet beneath her. Her mother was instantly at her side, while Lucian moved forward, doctor's instincts overriding courtroom protocol. Her water's broken, he announced, already checking his watch for contraction timing. We need to get her to the hospital. Graham stood, his controlled facade cracking. Now, but the hearing— Your Honor, Monroe's lawyer interrupted. I move for a continuance. The judge nodded, already gathering her papers. Granted, obviously. She looked at Monroe with something like amused sympathy. It seems your daughters have their own sense of timing. They get that from their mother, Lucian murmured, helping Monroe to her feet. The pain intensified, and Monroe gripped Lucian's arm. I can't. The custody decision will wait, her mother said firmly. Right now you have more important work to do. As they helped her from the courtroom, Monroe caught a glimpse of Graham's face, confused, angry, but also something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, like maybe, finally, he was seeing her clearly, not as someone to control, but as someone strong enough to choose her own path. In the courthouse hallway, between contractions, Monroe found herself laughing despite the pain. "Care to share the joke?" Lucian asked, his hand steady at her back. "Just thinking," she managed, "about all those boundaries we tried to maintain. And here we are. My water breaking in your courtroom testimony." His smile was tender as he helped her into the wheelchair a court officer had produced. "Some stories write themselves. We just have to be brave enough to live them." "Speaking of brave," Monroe gasped as another contraction hit, "I hope you're ready for this next dance. It might get messy. Together," he promised. And in that word was every step they'd taken, every boundary crossed, every truth finally spoken. As they wheeled her toward the exit, the winter sun broke through Baltimore's clouds, painting the courthouse steps in shades of gold and promise. Two stars were about to join their earthly dance, and not even Graham's lawyers could argue with that timing. Celeste and Nova were coming, ready to write their own story, to join their mother's brave dance, to prove that sometimes the most beautiful moments come just when you think all hope is lost. And in the space between one contraction and the next, Monroe found herself smiling through tears, because finally, she was exactly where she needed to be, surrounded by real love, real strength, real family. Even if it had taken two stubborn stars and one broken boundary to get her there. Time moved differently in the delivery room, measured not in minutes, but in breaths, in heartbeats, in the space between contractions. Monroe gripped the hospital bed rails, sweat darkening the loose curls around her face, as another wave of pain crashed through her. "You're doing beautifully," her mother murmured, wiping Monroe's forehead with a cool cloth. "Just like we practiced." On her other side, Lucian stood in street clothes rather than his usual doctor's attire, hospital policy firmly enforced by Dr. Chen, who'd taken over Monroe's care. He couldn't be her physician today. Instead, he was simply the man who'd chosen to dance this complicated waltz with her, who now held her hand through each contraction as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Celeste is crowning," Dr. Chen announced. "Just one more big push, Monroe." Monroe bore down, channeling every ounce of strength she had left. The room filled with the sound of her effort. Then suddenly, magnificently, a baby's cry pierced the air. "She's here," Lucian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Monroe, she's perfect." Celeste was placed on Monroe's chest, tiny and red and absolutely beautiful. Her cries softened as Monroe touched her cheek with trembling fingers. "Hello, my little star." But there was no time to linger. Nova was ready for her entrance. The second twin arrived just 4 minutes after her sister, announcing herself with a cry even louder than Celeste's. "Definitely your daughters," Lucian said, laughing through tears as Nova was placed beside her sister. Strong voices and perfect timing. Monroe couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the sight of her daughters together at last. Celeste and Nova, named for the stars but bright enough to create their own light. Their tiny hands seemed to reach for each other, already connected by something deeper than space and time. A commotion outside the delivery room drew their attention. Through the window, Monroe caught a glimpse of Graham arguing with a nurse. He'd apparently arrived just minutes too late for the birth. Something about traffic and his lawyer's meeting running long. "Do you want me to—" Lucian started, but Monroe shook her head. "Let him wait," she said softly, watching her daughters' faces. "This moment belongs to us." Her mother squeezed her shoulder, understanding in her eyes. "I'll go talk to him. You focus on these beautiful girls." After she left, Monroe looked up at Lucian, finding in his face everything she felt, wonder, joy, and something deeper that had been growing between them since that first day in the waiting room. "They're really here," she whispered. "They really are." He perched carefully on the edge of her bed, one hand gentle on Nova's back, while the other remained twined with Monroe's. They're exactly who they're meant to be. A soft knock interrupted them. Graham stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. His usual polished appearance was rumpled, his eyes fixed on the twins with an expression Monroe had never seen before. "Can I—" He swallowed hard. "Can I meet them?" Monroe studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Come say hello to your daughters." Graham approached slowly, as if afraid they might disappear. "They're so small, but mighty," Monroe said. "This is Celeste." She nodded to the baby on her left. "And this is Nova." "Star names," Graham said quietly. "You always did love the night sky." He reached out, then stopped himself. "May I?" Monroe nodded again, and Graham touched Celeste's tiny hand with surprising gentleness. The baby gripped his finger, and something in his face changed, softened, cracked, transformed. He started, then had to clear his throat. I've been doing this all wrong, haven't I? Yes, Monroe said simply. You have. Graham straightened, but not with his usual arrogance. My lawyer has papers drawn up. Joint custody, generous visitation, no supervision required. He met Monroe's eyes. If you're willing to consider it. Monroe felt Lucian tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. We can talk about it later. Right now, she looked down at her daughters, perfect and new and already teaching her about love. Right now, they need their mother to rest and their father to understand that some things can't be controlled with legal papers. Graham nodded, understanding finally reaching his eyes. They need us to be better. For them. He glanced at Lucian, something like resignation crossing his face. Sign all of us. After Graham left, promising to return during regular visiting hours, Monroe felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Lucian wiped them away with his thumb. Happy tears? He asked softly. Grateful ones. She looked up at him. For this moment, for these girls, for you, for us, he corrected, and leaned down to kiss her forehead. All of us. The twins slept peacefully between them, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. Outside, Baltimore's winter sun broke through the clouds, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and possibility. You know, Lucian said, watching Celeste and Nova's fingers intertwine, I think they've been teaching us to dance all along. Oh, Monroe smiled, exhausted but radiant. How so? Step by step, heart by heart, teaching us that sometimes the most beautiful choreography is the one you couldn't plan. He touched Nova's dark curls gently. That love isn't about perfect timing or maintained boundaries. It's about being brave enough to try, Monroe finished. To trust, to believe in second chances and new beginnings. And third and fourth chances, Lucian added with a soft laugh. However many it takes to get it right. The twins stirred, perhaps dreaming of their own private galaxy where they'd waited so long to join this earthly dance. Monroe held them closer, feeling Lucian's strength beside her, her mother's love in the room, and even Graham's awakening understanding. Welcome to the dance, my little stars, she whispered to her daughters. It's messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful, and we're all here to dance it with you. Celeste and Nova slept on, while around them love wrote its own choreography, in heartbeats and hope, in endings and beginnings, in all the perfectly imperfect steps that had led them here, to this room, this moment, this family being born not just of blood and pain, but of courage and choice and hearts brave enough to try again. In the end, it wasn't about maintaining boundaries or following rules. It was about recognizing when love was real enough to break them all, and being brave enough to let it. 1 year later, the late autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves through Baltimore's Patterson Park. Monroe sat on a checkered picnic blanket, watching as Celeste and Nova took wobbly steps in the grass, their first birthday dresses matching the golden afternoon light. At 12 months old, the twins were already showing distinct personalities. Celeste, thoughtful and observant, holding onto her sister's hand, Nova, bold and laughing, leading their shared adventure. They're getting faster, Lucian said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee from their favorite cart. Soon they'll be outrunning both of us. Already are. Monroe accepted her cup, cream, no sugar, the way she'd taken it since those midnight grocery store meetings. Her gold earrings caught the sunlight as she leaned against his shoulder. Though I notice you still managed to catch them before they raid your medical journals. Professional hazard. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. Can't have them learning anatomy before ABCs. They watched as the twins discovered a pile of leaves, their delighted squeals drawing smiles from passing joggers. Monroe's mother, visiting for the birthday celebration, helped them throw handfuls of red and gold into the air. Graham called this morning, Monroe said softly. Wanted to confirm next weekend's visit. He's taking them to the aquarium. With Veronica? No, just him. Monroe smiled slightly. And he said he wants to really see them, not just check a box on his custody agreement. The past year had been a dance of its own, learning to co-parent, to share holidays, to put the twins first. Graham had surprised them all, showing up for doctor's appointments and milestone moments, slowly becoming the father he'd never planned to be. Speaking of agreements, Lucian shifted, suddenly nervous. Dr. Chen mentioned the practice is expanding. They're looking for a new OB-GYN. Monroe turned to face him. Oh, I'm thinking of transferring. Different hospital, Different ethics board. His eyes met hers. No more professional boundaries to navigate. You love Baltimore Memorial, Monroe said softly. Your whole career. I love you more. The words were simple, certain. You and the girls. Besides, his smile turned playful. The new hospital is closer to a certain middle school. Better for impromptu lunch dates between surgeries. Monroe's heart skipped, the way it still did when he looked at her like that. You're sure? About changing hospitals? Yes. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. About this, absolutely certain. The ring caught the autumn light, not a diamond, but two small stars, their points touching. Monroe's breath caught as Lucian shifted to one knee on their picnic blanket. I had a whole speech planned, he said, about constellations and timing and love that breaks all the rules. But looking at you now, with our girls dancing in the leaves, he took her hand. I just want to ask, will you dance with me? Every day, for the rest of our lives? Tears blurred Monroe's vision as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The twins, as if sensing the moment, tottered over to tumble into their laps. Nova reached for the ring box while Celeste patted her mother's cheeks, catching her happy tears. Look, little stars, Monroe whispered as Lucian slipped the ring onto her finger. Daddy's asking us to dance forever. Dance, Nova declared, while Celeste clapped her tiny hands. Monroe's mother appeared with her phone, capturing the moment. Their little family tangled together on a picnic blanket, autumn leaves swirling around them like nature's confetti. Perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its truth. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep in their cribs and Baltimore's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, Monroe and Lucian swayed together in their kitchen. No music played except the rhythm of their hearts, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant lullaby of city life. Remember when we tried so hard not to fall in love? Monroe asked, her head on his chest. So worst choreography ever, Lucian murmured into her hair. Thank God our daughters knew better. Through the kitchen window, Celeste and Nova's namesakes shone bright in the clear night sky. Below, in a small Baltimore home filled with children's toys and medical textbooks, crayon drawings and coffee mugs, two people who'd once been afraid to trust love held each other close. And they danced. Not perfectly, not according to any rules or boundaries or carefully maintained distances, but truly, deeply, with all the courage and joy their daughters had taught them to find. They danced like stars finding their orbit, like hearts finding their home, like love finally, beautifully, eternally breaking free. A message to our viewers. What would you risk for love? Would you break boundaries, face fears, dance beyond the safety of carefully drawn lines? Your participation in this channel means everything to us. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What did Monroe and Lucian's story teach you about love, courage, and the beauty of beginning again? Remember, sometimes the bravest dance is the one that breaks all the rules. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly the dance your heart needs to learn. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.